Just met lots and lots of people who said their night was terrible. The day is going to be terrible. They're just huddled down in there, just waiting for this storm to be over. To be fair to the officials, they gave them safe shelter and are going to give them safe shelter. They never promised it was going to be a 4-star luxury resort, and it is not. So we're going to hear a lot of complaints coming out of there, Anderson. But like I said, good. We'll be able to at least hear those people complain who have gone through this storm. Anderson?
Yeah, and Drew, I mean, it bears repeating, people were told to bring supplies to that shelter. I mean, the shelter was supposed to have supplies as well, and did, but people are told to bring items, bring things for at least 3 days. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, you've got to prepare. You can't rely on the government to provide everything for you, especially in these conditions. And keep in mind, everybody in the government has their own family to deal with. There were lots and lots of people outside the shelter smoking. A lot of people brought enough smokes for their visit. So I'm just saying, you got to be prepared for these kind of things. And most people in Florida are. Anderson.
Yeah, I talked to the mayor here in Tampa yesterday, who was saying, you know, they were in the days before this, while they were preparing for the storm, there's no doubt about it, they knew the size of the storm, it was going to affect Tampa no matter what, but they were also thinking about how they were going to be helping other communities, perhaps on the East Coast, where it seemed earlier in the week that the storm was really going to be tracking, and then again yesterday the mayor, you know, had a very different reality to face. This is a city which may be asking for help from cities on the East Coast in the days ahead. We're going to take a short break. Our coverage continues in a moment.
Well, it's very rainy, very, very windy. We've actually moved. We may not look like we're in a safe location, but we really feel safe. We've moved to a structure because we're not on the docks anymore. I'm going to step this way so you can see what's going on out here. But this really gives you a really nice vantage point of the Tarpon Point Marina here. And you can see all the boats out in the distance, the sway. But I want you to look out to the point of the palm trees. You ever notice on Matt 7-Day when he puts the wavy palm tree in the wind up, or maybe the double one because there's a hurricane? Well, that's what it looks like in real life. You see it right there. You can also see how choppy right now and how aggressive the river looks. That's the Caloosahatchee River right there. So that gives you an idea of just how close we are to it. And you can see all the boat docks here. We left the boat docks because it was just too windy up there. So we're going to step inside the structure here right now. We're a little better protected. And I want you to look at the docks and look down there, because occasionally we'll actually see people down there who are just doing some final checks on their boat, making sure everything is okay. We really kind of at this point advise against that. That's why we left the docks, because it's super windy down there. But we did have a chance to meet up with one gentleman who was doing a final check on his boat. And of course, just like everyone's been saying, all our meteorologists have been telling us, we're really concerned about that storm surge. And let's take a listen to what he had to say about the storm surge, because he's also concerned.
But I think we could probably get an 8-foot surge in here, which would put water almost up in this where we're standing here. So we're hoping for the best, but preparing for the worst as usual.
Okay, take a live look at this right now, guys. That is a sailboat out there. It is anchored out in the cove here at Tarpon Point. Now, typically, any major boater or mariner in Southwest Florida would tell you this cove in Southwest Florida, probably one of the safest anchorages we have out here. They'll come in here all the time, maybe on a weekend, to avoid a storm. Obviously, this is not your average storm, not your average day. We assume that probably nobody is on that vessel. They've probably dinging to shore. But if you saw how small it was and you saw the way the wind was just blowing it and crashing water against it, that just gives you an idea of what the conditions are out here. So like I said, we've come up off the dock. We're in this parking structure now, kind of 5 stories up, but we're pretty protected in here, so we feel a little bit safe. So we give you just a little bit more from the look outside before we have to go inside, before things get a little too hairy. But again, conditions continue to deteriorate, especially here in Cape Coral. We can also report, I know you guys probably talked about a little bit ago, Lee County deputies have pulled their deputies off the road. Cape Coral police and first responders here in Cape Coral doing the same thing once those winds reach 40 miles an hour, and basically we're right about there, guys.
Yeah, Mother Nature making that sailboat almost look like a toy there in the water. Thanks, John. Well, this is apparently our camera out at the Hyatt at Coconut Point. You can't see anything.
And that's very telling that you can't see anything. You can just see how heavy the rain is falling. And, you mix the rain with the wind and you get this sort of effect. You can barely see. I'm sure the visibility is down dramatically out there.
And again, this is at Coconut Point. I do want to just tell you, this is an image in Coconut Point. Sarah, in Marco Island, you can imagine what they're dealing with. And we did just get into the newsroom. I want to get this out real quick because we were talking to Scott, who is sheltering in Marco Island with 4 other people, that they have experienced system-wide water pressure loss. So they said at this point, you need, if you're there, you need to boil
just
your
look
water
at
until
what the
further
conditions
notice.
are like
For the
out
few
here
people
in
who,
Miami
were
Beach.
not-
And a little perspective, the area that we're standing at is not as bad as some of the city streets that are literally wind tunnels. The force of the wind is much worse. That area that you're looking at right now, if you go just over the berm, my producer Tristan Smith went over there just to see if the storm surge had come in. It had not, but he was completely beat up by the winds and the sand. It is very dangerous out here. You want to make sure the thing that we're watching for is any sort of flying debris. We've seen at least 3 street signs come down. That type very, very dangerous. But just trying to stand here.
All right, I think we're losing Kyung-La out in Miami Beach. Kyung-La is out in Miami Beach, by the way, which is out there. You can't really see it now because it is raining so hard and the clouds have come in so thick. They have had serious issues with the winds out there. We're having it here, too, in Miami. We have had debris flying off the buildings. And, of course, the breaking news is this cracked crane in downtown Miami. I want to go to Rosa Flores, who is in Miami right now, for an update on what she is seeing. Rosa.
Well, John, we've been monitoring those cranes for days now because, as you mentioned, the city officials told us that they did not have enough time to move those cranes. Here in this area where I'm at, if we just tilt our camera, you'll see that there are 2 cranes right behind me. They're swaying in the wind. We've seen them continuously. Now, what we're seeing are wind tunnels. These wind tunnels wrap around buildings and they really, really gain a lot of strength. And so whenever we see and hear those wind tunnels, and the only way to describe them is this high-pitched screeching sound, that's when we see those cranes sway even more. Of course, a huge concern for everybody living in these high-rises in downtown Miami. Now, city officials advised people that lived in these high-rise buildings to evacuate because of that. Now, our weather team advised us that when a hurricane is a Category 3 or 4, for example, you've got to add a category in order for you to realize how the wind speed is in a lot of these high-rise buildings. Now, the one that's right behind me, these people appear to have heeded the warning. I don't see any patio furniture, which is one of the things that city officials recommended, that they needed to remove everything from their balconies because, of course, during a storm, all of that becomes flying debris, projectiles. Now, we've seen a few people come out of their balconies. That's what city officials don't recommend for people to do. They're asking people to stay indoors, hunker down. And, John, believe it or not, in the last hour, we saw a family speed through here. We didn't get to talk to them because they were driving so fast, but it looked like they were trying to evacuate at this hour. That, of course, would city officials and first responders are not recommending because the conditions are very dangerous at this hour. John?
Yeah, you're better off staying where you are right now. First responders not responding to calls in all of Miami-Dade County. That's a county of more than 2.5 million people. Not safe for them to be out because the wind's consistently higher than 40 miles an hour. That's just here in Miami-Dade. The entire east coast of southern Florida feeling the impact of this storm right now. I want to go up the coast to Brian Todd, who's in West Palm Beach. Brian.
John, very intense wind activity that's kicked up in the last couple of hours here. what we're vulnerable to right now is tornadoes. Our weather team has told us that because we're on the so-called dirty side of the storm, where most of the energy, at least at this hour, is going to be pushing toward us, tornadoes, pop-up tornadoes are going to be a threat all day. We've been under tornado warnings. That means flying debris, trees snapping, wires coming down. We got a word from a city official not long ago that they do have a word of a tree pinching down a wire in town. They're monitoring this closely. Storm surge is also a threat here. We're by the Intercoastal Waterway. Down there you can see the intensity of the storm surge against that walkway there as the waves slap up against it. That's only going to get worse as the hurricane conditions worsen in the next few hours. We're going to try to walk over this way along this railing. Got to hold on to it a little bit because, as you've been reporting, John, that cracking of the crane in Miami, officials here have been worried about that for several days. There are two large construction cranes just off my right shoulder. You can see them up there. They've been swaying in the wind a little bit. There are two other construction cranes further to my right, to your left, down the block. What's unique here is that these construction cranes are right next to apartment buildings in some cases, and we've talked to residents who've said they are really afraid of these construction cranes coming down on them. Down that way, south on Flagler Street, we talked to a resident where there was a construction crane literally right next to her building, and she said, I am very concerned about this thing coming down on my building. So we're going to be watching these things very closely. Also, John, over here is a construction site with a lot of loose debris flying. As these tornadic conditions start to impact us here in West Palm Beach, we've got to keep a close eye on that. A lot of flying debris. You can see the strain on these palm trees. There are palm fronds down on the ground over there. Those become projectiles in a case like this. So we're monitoring all this really closely, and of course, keeping a close eye on those cranes back there. Going to toss it back to Chris Cuomo.
All right, Brian, you're a pro. Be smart, be safe. Let us know what we need to know and when to come back to you. We have a crane over our shoulder here in Naples. So far, so good, but it is something that they keep an eye on. We had the city manager on. There have been gusts here reported in excess of 70 miles an hour. Not a big deal, but we're also hours away from what was supposed to be the bad stuff from Irma. So there's a concern about the consistency of the beating and the duration of the water and what that will mean to an already vulnerable and low-lying area. So let's get to Chad Myers. Chad, you gave me a piece of information. I checked with the city manager. You were right. They are seeing what does look like a wild phenomenon here. Yes. The water seems to be receding. Yes. And you were right about something else. It does fuel false optimism. People are reporting it as a good thing. The water seems to be leaving, but what is the reality?
The reality is that the water is getting blown out of Naples, getting blown out of Tampa Bay, getting blown out of all of the rivers on the west side of the state because the wind is blowing in that direction into the Gulf of Mexico. The wind blowing into Miami, water still going up almost 6 feet above low tide right now in Miami and still going up. Here's the new track, brand new track, takes the storm over just about Fort Myers as a landfall, if we'll call it that, skirting the coast, significantly grinding the coast here, Sarasota, Annabelle, all the way down, even into Fort Myers, Venice as well. That's the problem. It's not going to lose power because it's still half on water, half on land, and really doing damage to all of those coastal communities here. As the storm goes by, Chris, your wind will shift to this direction, so all the water that went out is going to come crashing back in. Do not go into your canal and pick up something that you lost off your boat 2 weeks ago. You need to stay out of the water. That water will come crashing back in to those canals from Marco Island and the like. I heard you have an interview with someone in Marco. Marco will be underwater. The entire island will be underwater. I know he's on the second or third floor, but so what? The rest of your building is underwater. All of the utilities underwater. All the power is underwater. There's the radar for what we have because Key West is now failed. Probably not that unusual in a hurricane, but Miami is also having problems, not giving out any signals right now. Isn't that interesting with the infrastructure going on here? So we will lose Miami here for a while. They're going to try to take it down and bring it back up. But there is the eye heading into the Everglades. That will push water into the Everglades 10 to 15 feet deep. and that will flood Marco, Cape Coral, and all the here's from Bonita Springs to Marco Island and Naples will see 10 to 15-foot storm surges as the storm goes by. Then it travels up the east coast, the west coast here, pushing water onto the east coast all the way up here. Expect coastal flooding, especially at high tide, all the way from Fort Pierce right through Orlando, especially to the east of there, into Merritt Island and such, and on this side, and also even into, I would say, the Cocoa Beach area. You could see surges of 3 to 4 feet. Look at the wind gusts we're expecting. This is now over the entire storm. We're going to see a wind gust in Key West, 135. So far, we don't have that number yet because there's nothing to measure it. Right now, so far, we saw someone on the ground at 131. Obviously, that's unconfirmed. 128 Naples, 137 Fort Myers, and 127 in Tampa. That's the latest because of the storm on the west side of the state. The east side, Fort Pierce, 87, Miami, 90, and Key Largo, 96. For Miami, it's just getting going. The eye is not as close to you as we'll get. For you, Chris, the eye is still on the way.
Yeah, Chad, if you guys can hear me, we're taking big power hits here at the hotel. I have been hearing what you're saying, and it is an interesting phenomenon here because if we're taking big power hits here at the hotel now, and these trees are starting to sway like this now, and the gusts are what they are now, and we haven't even seen the heavy stuff yet from Irma. It is what you've been teaching me about the last couple of days about the cumulative effect. What's being weakened right now by these medium gusts and what will be therefore sent to failure by the real gusts when they get here. And of course, the flood surge, a big and unique concern here as well. Chad, thank you very much. Thank you for keeping me apprised of the situation on email. It's good to have the information in advance so we can explain to people on the ground what they're seeing and what they're not seeing. All right, let's take a break here while we figure out what's going on with our power situation. Again, we're now officially on the clock with Hurricane.
Manny Bojorquez is in Naples, which could get a big brunt of this storm and is already getting that right now. Actually, we're going to go to Manny Bojorquez is in Fort Lauderdale. Manny?
That's right. We are in Fort Lauderdale where winds are expected to reach 75 miles per hour later today. And as you can see, we are well on our way to that. What we've been seeing here throughout the morning is these gusts picking up, the rain increasing. Any of these shrubs or tree branches that are not strong are falling into this canal right here. And speaking of the canal, I can tell you that from being here last night to what we're seeing now, it is definitely rising. So the concern here, not just the strong winds that we're seeing right now and the rain, but of course the storm surge and the flooding that might happen. Here in Broward County, you have 15,000 people who are riding this storm out in shelters. That's what officials wanted to see. And the reason why is because those buildings are strong enough to withstand some of the impacts of the wind here, but also because right now you have a situation because of these weather conditions where you cannot have law enforcement on the roads. They cannot respond to all the calls that they're getting right now. We do know that as the storm continues to pummel this area, there are power lines down, there are trees down, and you can see exactly why that would be happening. There are palm fronds that are just swirling around the parking lot next to us right now. We are cognizant of the fact that there is the danger of flying debris here right now. But again, we wanted to let you know what the conditions are. To give you perspective, where we are right now is about 100 miles away from where Irma made landfall. That should tell you how large this storm is and how widespread the impacts will be. Think about that, 100 miles away, and the impacts, the effects of this hurricane are that strong. Jeff?
Manny, thank you very much. You talk about the breadth of this hurricane. Mark Strassman is in Miami and southeastern Florida, which isn't going to get the worst, but it's still very bad. Mark?
It is really bad, Jeff. These are really punishing winds here. You can sort of see up my face and just all around me here. When you cross a street like this, which really is a wind tunnel, you have to look both ways, not for traffic because there is no traffic, but for flying debris, for tree limbs, and for traffic signs. Flash flooding, another issue here. There's flash flooding up and down here. It's not coming from storm surge. It's just flash flooding, at least so far. Most people, of course, have evacuated here, and with good reason. This was the largest evacuation in Miami-Dade's history, an area that obviously has seen lots of hurricanes come and go over the years. But for people who have decided to stay put and hunker down, they're really on their own at this point. Just as Manny was talking about with emergency responders up in Broward, in Miami-Dade, by and large, they're not responding to calls. If somebody needs help, they got to figure it out on their own. So there are a number of people probably who are having serious second thoughts about their decision to stay put. More than 700,000 people have lost power in South Florida's 3 major counties. That could be a lingering issue that goes on for days, even weeks, depending on how widespread power outages are in the rest of Florida. These conditions are not getting better. In fact, in the last hour or so, I would say, they've picked up and gone up to the next level. We had one measurement, a wind gust of 98 miles an hour about a half hour ago. In general, I would say these are 60-plus mile-an-hour winds here in downtown Miami. And this is really no place for anyone to be. The advice to people, wherever they are at this point, is no matter how scared you get, you have to hunker down. You cannot leave. The worst place to be during these conditions is out in a car, exposed on a highway, exposed to the full conditions and wrath of the storm. That's the worst. So, Jeff, bad here, and again, it doesn't look as though it's going to improve anytime soon.
Yeah, Mark, I was going to ask you about that. I was just in Miami with you, and that was one of the big concerns from police.
All right, we've lost Jeff Glore.
It is bad, and this morning when I got up, 4:30 this morning or so, I could hear the howling, the whistling of the storm raging outside. There were people who were getting up already. They couldn't sleep. It was a combination, I think, of the noise and the anxiety factor. And over the last 5-6 hours, as we stood out here, it has progressively gotten worse. And this is as bad as you can see. You can see these sheets of rain, or sheets of water at least, just rushing up the street. About 5-6 minutes ago, the second traffic sign in the last hour that is sheared off of its stand came flying down the street. Those things are extremely dangerous. I mean, that's the kind of thing that can take your head off if you're not careful. Yeah. So the whole sense that some people have of, I'm going to ride this one out. If they're going to ride this one out, they really better have a safe place and be just like hunkered down, battened down, and good to go, because this is really not a place to take any risks that are unnecessary. And just being here for people who are, especially for people who are unprepared, is a huge risk in itself.
Mark, what's your sense in terms of in the city of people who left? I mean, did you get a sense that a lot of people decided to get out of the city before this?
Yeah, it was the largest mass evacuation in Miami-Dade history, about 670,000 people. And let's face it, this is an area that has seen a lot of hurricanes and
it's not too windy right now. We could show you around just a bit. But you were talking, Jeff, about the tide rushing out. It was low tide earlier this morning. The tide should be coming in right now, but it is still extremely low. So all of that water has gotten sucked out of the bay. You could see the high tide mark on those pilings. Now, look at that home over there. You can imagine what it's going to be like when we get back up to high tide and then we get 8 feet of water on top of that. The island behind me, only about 3 feet above sea level. So this could be a big problem. Again, this area, these low-lying areas, all evacuated by 8 p.m. last night. They're asking people to stay off the roads now, especially because even when it seems calm, I'll tell you, another squall is right around the corner.
Yeah, Carter, that's one of the big concerns. You mentioned high tide. With high tide coming in later this afternoon, that it also coincides with the storm getting even worse. So that is a big concern. Still ahead, we're going to check in with another major city in Florida, Naples. We have correspondents all over this state right now. We're back right after this.
To me was that even people who in the past, who've lived here for a while and in the past who have had a bit of a blasé attitude about a Category 1 or a Category 2 hurricane that's on the radar and heading this way, they took this one seriously. I mean, there were lots of people here who said, I'm evacuating for the first time, the very first time, just because this one, there's something about it, it just seems different to me. It scares me.
For the Tampa, St. Petersburg, Clearwater area. But again, that's 5 to 8 feet of water rise. Then depending on these winds, and we're talking hurricane force winds, you're going to have waves on top of that water. So it's not just, 5 feet of water, 8 feet of water. Maybe it doesn't sound so bad to people. That wind action creates waves of potentially very, very, very high waves.
And then you figure the tides. If it's at high tide, that all the more
inland as far as they
adds
could.
to the complication.
Now, a lot of them, frankly, and especially if they left 72 hours ago, we're heading up towards Naples, Tampa, what turned out to be the wrong direction. There are a number of evacuees from Miami who, instead of leaving the hurricane, will now drive right into what the heart of Irma's path. And that's going to be another issue, is that not only the folks in Tampa Bay, who by and large were not nearly as prepared for this because they did not have the kind of storm warning, literal storm warning that South Florida had. Now you also have some folks from South Florida who had the storm warning, who went up I-75 all the way to Tampa Bay, and they now are in the path of this storm too. It really is an awful combination of circumstances all the way around.
All right, Mark Strassman in Miami, where, as he said, they are now feeling, they felt gusts already up to 90 miles an hour. Be careful out there, Mark. We want to bring in Eric Fisher.
Exactly.
We just got the latest update at the top of the 8 o'clock hour.
Covered up the whole state of Florida. Already you got 750,000 people in the Miami area without power. As the storm moves north over the entire state, you can imagine the amount of power outage. And that is the slow grind, the slow slog in the aftermath of the hurricane in the humid heat. That makes it very difficult to recover.
Yeah, in an area like Tampa, there may still be time to get to some local shelters. But again, the clock is ticking. That window is closing very, very fast. Let's say Authority Center Nelson will continue to talk to you in the days ahead. I want to take a short break, and our coverage of Hurricane Irma continues.
Is a hurricane-proof building here in Naples, and you can see this gust of wind already starting to rip this off. The wind, obviously a concern and a hazard, but the main concern, the biggest safety risk, is the storm surge. We've been talking about this all morning long. Naples is ground zero for that surge, anywhere from 10 to 15 feet high. That is high enough to cover
We are starting to see that center of circulation. It's about to make landfall over the Florida Keys. The biggest change in this latest advisory that we are seeing is it's losing some of that westward movement.
People who said they were going to hunker down and ride out this storm at home really started to panic. And then that's when private shelters really came into play. This location is actually a country club. It is open for the members and also for the public. And about 500 people are now inside riding out this storm as it continues to pick up in intensity. They're there right now, actually, as they're watching what we are watching, and this storm really picking up in its brutality. My heart, though, has really got to go out to the people that are on the barrier islands, because that's where I think this story is really going to unfold in the next few hours. We're talking about Marco Island, Captiva. Those are places, really slivers of sand with high rises on them and low rises. I spoke to one person yesterday who was riding out this storm with his family there, even though that was under a mandatory evacuation. And we also have to keep in mind the community that we're in. This is a retirement community. I have heard a number of stories of senior citizens home alone riding out the storm in their homes because they just did not want to leave and had nowhere else to go and no support system. So as this storm comes through, it's that population that we really have to be worried about and focused on, especially in the aftermath of this storm. Jeff.
And those are some of the folks who may have to wait the longest for help before police can safely get back out. It does not augur well, Jonathan, that some rooftops there are already beginning to come off, considering that winds are going to get twice as bad as they are right now. We are going to be right back with more special coverage of Hurricane Irma, but as we go to break here, we want to look at some pictures from Broward County, where look at those winds and look at those palm trees. Not even the worst of it. More on Hurricane Irma after this. 30-40 miles away from here, Carter Evans is there. They are also under a big threat today. Carter?
Here we go.
Jeff, let me show you right here. This is a common sight all around Sarasota, these roadblocks right now. This is the bridge over to Bay Isle and Siesta Key right now. These places were evacuated as of 8 p.m. yesterday. Nobody is supposed to be there, and for good reasons. You look out to the right here. This is Sarasota Bay. You can see the white caps on the water. It is quite tropic, quite rough right now. We're going to walk down here a little bit. We're kind of in between squalls, so it's not too windy right now. We could show you around just a bit. But you were talking, Jeff, about the tide rushing out. It was low tide earlier this morning. The tide should be coming in right now, but it is still extremely low, so all of that water has gotten sucked out of the bay. You can see the high tide mark on those pilings. Now, look at that home over there. You can imagine what it's going to be like when we get back up to high tide, and then we get 8 feet of water on top of that. The island behind me, only about 3 feet above sea level. So this could be a big problem. Again, this area, these low-lying areas, all evacuated by 8 p.m. last night. They're asking people to stay off the roads now, especially because even when it seems calm, I'll tell you, another squall is right around the corner.
Yeah, Carter, that's one of the big concerns. You mentioned high tide. With high tide coming in later this afternoon, that it also coincides with the storm getting even worse. So that is a big concern. Still ahead, we're going to check in with another major city in Florida, Naples. We have correspondents all over this state right now. We're back from Hurricane Harvey. Now it is preparing for another blast, this one from Irma, and Chris Van Cleve is there. Chris?
Jeff, we are seeing the winds really ramp up. We know gusts have gotten into the 60-mile-an-hour range at points, and now we've got a very heavy band of rain coming through. We were watching as the Lee County Sheriff's officers were coming off the streets. They knew when the wind hit about 40 miles an hour,
steady
all
rain
the first
for
responders
hours
were going to come off. They
no
came in a
major
line,
situation.
and as they were...
We are starting to see the water recede here, which is part of the phenomenon of energy movement within a hurricane. That water is going to return, and with it, a lot more as storm surge, which is going to bring energy, water, and trouble. The bad news is we've seen nothing yet. We are hours away from major impact here on the West Coast. So let's get to Chad Myers in the Weather Center. And I know this, frankly, because you've been telling me. You told me to look out for the receding water.
Yeah.
We're seeing it now. It's several feet back of where it's supposed to be. And you're saying that this is just a little hint of what's to come and why the people here need to pay attention for some hours to come.
Right. And this happened years ago, many years ago, in Lake Okeechobee when the water blew. The water was on one side of the lake. People went out there to pick up the fish on the bottom of the lake, and then the water came back and they all were killed. So please do not go into this dry land that Irma is making. The water will come back and come back quickly. Key West, Cudjoe, Summerland, Isla Mirada, the worst is over. It's north of you. The surge is still coming. The surge is still coming through these cuts in the Keys, but for the most part, it's over. Miami, it is not over. 3 more hours of now. That's when the eye will be closest to you, all the way up the coast. This now is 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Pouring storms onshore with tornadoes included with those storms. Finally, the storm has moved out of Tampa here across the state, pushed the water out of Tampa Bay. But now here, we're 5 o'clock, pushing the water back into Naples, Fort Myers, all the way up those rivers and estuaries just to the north of the Everglades there. By later on tonight, Orlando, you are in it at least 80 to 90 miles per hour, but the center of circulation is Tampa. That's when you will pick up 115 to 120 with winds in Tampa. As the storm goes by, that's when the surge comes back into Tampa Bay. The surge is all day long along the East Coast here, because now we're at 2 o'clock in the morning. And the surge in the wind doesn't change. We will still see water into St. John's. We'll see water into Savannah. We'll see water into Charleston, and we'll see water all the way up, possibly even to the north of there into Myrtle. There's the new track for 11 o'clock. 5 miles to the east of the old track. It's really an insignificant change, but it's still a Category 3 just to the south of Tampa. That's the big story. Still wind damage and still significant surge damage. And John, I'm tossing to you now. You can't see this graphic, but here's what happened to that crane. We just had a wind gust at Miami International to 93. That's on the ground. You go up 30 stories, that's 108. You go up to the top of some of the tallest cranes still building buildings in Miami, that's over 115. It goes up with height, and that's why that crane failed, John.
Yeah, you know, Chad, you warned us that was a possibility, particularly at those higher elevations in those high-rise buildings. Now we do have that crane, which the city is now calling a crane collapse. We are also getting new pictures, Chad, of some flooding on Brickell Ave here in downtown Miami. I cannot see the pictures. I can't see much of anything, frankly, where I'm standing right now with the rain in my face. Maybe you can, Chad, and you can tell us what we're looking at and what's happened there.
We still have that surge now. When we talked about the surge, the wind blowing onshore, it's blown through and into Biscayne Bay, and the water has pushed right on up into the city itself, exactly as we expected. Water rushing into the lowest floors of those buildings, certainly into the elevator shafts and the electrical rooms that are downstairs in those buildings, essentially cutting off the people that may have decided to stay on those upper floors. You can see the amount of water that's at least a couple of feet. And unless those buildings are raised a little bit, water is pouring into those lobbies as we expected. And high tide isn't here yet. The wind will still be in the same direction for at least 5 more hours. And that water, I believe, will continue to go up.
Yeah, Chad, we are seeing a little bit of that even here where I'm standing right now. The water behind me, you can see that dock going out to those jet skis and the water lapping over that dock. That dock you can see. What you can't see is there are 3 docks completely underwater right now, under about a foot of water here where we're standing. Miami expecting 3 to 6 feet of storm surge. If it reaches the 6-foot level, it would be up to my knees about here. We're watching it very carefully. We are going to be very careful here in Miami. Now, out there is Miami Beach. Much lower in elevation than even where I am right now, in a serious concern as well for storm surge. It's also where Kyung La has been getting pounded all morning. Before we go out to her, Chad, I want to go back to you in the Weather Center. Chad?
Sure, John. You know, obviously everything will change in a hurricane, and what changed over the week was from where we thought there was a possibility of a direct landfall in Miami with 135-mile-per-hour winds, shifted about 60 miles to the west. And you're going to say, wow, what a big shift. But you know what? The Hurricane Center always had the West Coast involved in this storm. It was never out of the cone, and the models did a truly remarkable job 5 days in advance, and they missed it by 60 or 70 miles. You know, I would love that for a snowstorm in the winter, that we could plan it 5 days in advance. So the models are getting better. The European model did a little bit better with this storm than the American model, but you see the water on that live shot there on the right. You can see the water pouring into downtown Miami because of the wind direction still pouring through. There are cuts here. There are cuts along, and I just with my son for spring break went to this really beautiful sanctuary down here in Key Biscayne. And you need to go there as soon as they clean everything up, because there's a lot of surge going on there right now. Water is pouring into Key Biscayne, going up the intercoastal, and that intercoastal will be the area that may push more water up into Fort Lauderdale, where surge is typically not a problem because the barrier island is pretty solid. But it's the cuts in the island, it's the cuts in those barrier islands where the water is truly rushing through. Isla Mirada, I just got an email saying just about a 7-foot surge, but the water is going through Vaca Cut in Marathon at a rate no one has ever seen. Now, this surge that's down here may be taking some of those bridges and making those supports weak. So you're not going to get back to the Keys anytime soon. This is not over even after the eye goes by. John?
All right, Chad Myers, thanks so much. I just want to reiterate a point that Chad made. Tampa, the west coast of Florida, which hasn't seen the worst of it and may get the worst of it, always in the cone. Always in the forecast cone that Chad has been talking about for a few days. So the forecast has been dead on. And as for Miami, where I'm right now, which may not get it as bad as it could have, still bad enough that people who were told to evacuate really needed to, just because of the storm surge we are seeing now in parts of the downtown area. As I was saying before, out there somewhere beyond the rain and the clouds is Miami Beach, more low-lying than where I'm standing right now, and the winds have been gusting even harder than where I'm standing right now, and that is where Kyung La has been standing in the face of the wind, braving the wind for hours now. Kyung?
Well, John, it feels like hours, and it has been pelting us throughout. And we've continued to see the rain and the wind and the force of all of this pick up. It certainly has picked up in the last hour or so since I was out here. I want you to look at that street sign. It's just spinning. And so what happens is these street signs break off and then they end up being projectiles. That's something that's concerning the city officials here. That's why they have said that they wanted a mandatory evacuation. Thankfully, we have not seen too many people walking out and about. We have seen some storm chasers, but other than that, it's been pretty desolate, and there's good reason. You can't stand in this stuff too long. We have not seen flooding here. That is major flooding from the storm surge. I did send, my producer volunteered, Tristan Smith volunteered to go to the beach, and he did not see the storm surge, any impact from the storm surge over here. So that's very good news, because the concern here from the Miami Beach Fire Department was that people would get caught unawares and that they would drown. But right now, the biggest concern is the wind. A lot of these buildings have they have protection against the windows. I'm standing against the steel rail, so we are fine. And so far, all the coconuts from the palm trees that are nearby, they appear to be gone. It's just the perspective that we have here that we want to share with the people on the West, John, is that this isn't the worst of it. It is going to be getting worse. John?
That's right. Could be worse on the West Coast. Kyung La single-handedly holding up that steel wall out there at Miami Beach. Kyung, thank you so much. So a lot of this storm being felt right now here in downtown Miami. We have some flooding now from the storm surge that Chad Myers was just talking about. We also have a crane collapse on 300 Biscayne Boulevard. Rosa Flores, not far from where I am in downtown, to give us an update on what she is seeing. Rosa.
Well, John, we're seeing wind tunnels, cracked cranes, and storm surge here where I'm at. Now, take a look around me. Every now and then you will feel this amazing wind blast, wind gusts very, very high. As Chad was mentioning, we can feel them here down on the ground, but you multiply that number and that wind speed once you go up. This high-rise that you see behind me, the good news here, you see that none of the patio furniture is there. That was removed. As we pan over, we see one of these cranes. Now, we know there are between 20 and 25 cranes that the skyline. These two have survived. We, of course, have confirmed that another crane further north did crack. That one snapped. And then we are about to move our position, John, to be able to show you some of that water that is coming in from the ocean, that storm surge. I'm about 3 blocks from the water. We're about to move our position to be able to show you how some of that water is coming in. Storm surge, of course, extremely dangerous. This is the ocean coming inland. Now, the scary part is we have seen some people try to walk in that water. People that are walking their dogs are trying to run in this weather. Not advised, John. Not advised because of how dangerous it is. Not only because of the wind, but because of projectiles and now storm surge. John?
All right, Rosa Flores in downtown Miami, checking out the storm surge for us shortly. Rosa, thanks so much. Let's go now to David Halstead, former Director of Emergency Management for the state of Florida. And David, let's talk about what we're seeing right now in Miami. And let me preface this by saying that Miami may not even get the worst of this storm. That could be on the west coast of Florida. But we do have some developments we do need to talk about. Number one, the storm surge. The water starting to go in to some of those streets in downtown, David. What should people be concerned about there?
Well, certainly, again, the flying debris that we've been talking about all morning is critical to further damage. But the water as it comes in, obviously, we need to be aware of down power lines, people that, in fact, can't get themselves in trouble. Much of that water also, as you remember, is going to end up being contaminated to some extent as it mixes with septic or sewer water or other chemicals, around gas stations, etc. So walking in it, being in it is not such a good idea.
David, I wish you were here beside me like last night because I could use you to lean on right now. The other development here in Miami just over the last hour is this crane. The first word was it was cracked, and then the city put out a tweet saying collapsed. You know, the terminology might not be important here. The important thing is this crane has, part of it has toppled over onto a building under construction, 300 Biscayne Boulevard. More than 20 of these cranes here in Miami, and now city officials say do not go to that area. We've got several hours more of these storm force winds here in Miami. David, how concerned should people be in this city?
I would say with the cranes especially, staying away from them, probably even thousands of feet, because if this crane lets loose and comes down, the wind is going to take it to some extent and make it a flying missile. Depends how far it's going to go, depends upon the wind speed and obviously the weight of the crane. So it's very important that we stay away from them, make sure that I'm sure the law enforcement is doing that. I know they've done their best to evacuate buildings close to that, though I heard a reporter in West Palm say that they did not evacuate the apartment building where some of those cranes are at. That could cause a great concern as these winds pick up, because as we know, we're not even in the worst of the storm yet.
No, we're not. We're about the worst of it maybe here in Miami, but the worst part of the storm is going to go around the Florida Peninsula and up the West Coast. In Miami Beach, which is over there, Miami-Dade County with more than 2.5 million people, first responders saying they cannot answer your calls right now because the winds are gusting too strong. People have to wait. And then up the West Coast, we're starting to hear from city after city, including Tampa, where they are going to impose curfews as the day gets later. David, what's the thinking behind that?
Well, I can just tell you from an emergency management, and I used to be a former fire chief also, that you're at the point now of the dark side of the moon. You remember the Apollo spacecrafts, when they went around the moon, they lost communications, lost really sight and visibility on what was happening. No crew could help them until they came around to the other side of the moon. This is the same thing in emergency management, emergency response right now. We've got everyone hunkered down, all law enforcement and fire are off the streets. We can't really put our eyes and ears on what's happening. In some cases, we're losing communication. We're going to lose more of it as the storm moves up the west coast of Florida there. So until we can really get our eyes set after the storm winds leave and really visibly look at what's happened and how bad the damage is, we're not really going to have a good sense of it. I can tell you the emergency responders right now are prioritizing those 911 calls. In some cases, I know my firefighter brothers and sisters are probably maybe ignoring some of that stay in place depending upon the criticality of the call. But they're stacking them up. They're going to be ready to go.
All right, David Halstead for us here, former Director of Emergency Management in the state of Florida. Thanks so much for being with us. I'm doing a little bit of a rain dance out here. It's more like a wind dance getting blown around here in downtown Miami. Some storm surge now in the downtown area. The crane has collapsed. Just the beginning of some of the destruction that will come to the Florida Peninsula as Hurricane Irma begins to move up and make that turn up the West Coast. Stay with CNN special live coverage. We'll be right back.
I'm Jeff Glor along with Anthony Mason at CBS News headquarters in New York as we track Irma. The storm is moving northward up the Gulf Coast of Florida. We are in St. Pete Beach. St. Petersburg and Tampa are just to our east. After making initial landfall earlier this morning in the lower Keys, that's what Irma did about 20 miles east of Key West. Irma is now tracking maximum sustained winds of 130 miles an hour. That's a Category 4 hurricane. 3 deaths are reported in Florida after more than 24 were killed in the Caribbean. This is a very wide storm. Hurricane and tropical storm winds extend out more than 200 miles from the center. Nearly 2 million homes and businesses have lost power so far, while over 100,000 people have taken refuge in shelters. We're going to check in with Adriana Diaz, who is in Orlando. Adriana?
Jeff, believe it or not, just a few hours ago, this area in downtown Orlando was full of people jogging, walking their dogs, really going about their daily business. That's because it was just drizzling. But since the rain has intensified, there seems to have been a shift in the mood. There are very few people now on the streets. Stores downtown have been closed. The mayor has instituted a mandatory curfew tonight at 7 p.m., lasting all the way until tomorrow at 6 p.m. That's nearly 24 hours. Now, she says part of the reason is because a bulk of the injuries that occur during these types of hurricanes actually happen after the hurricane passes through, when people emerge to check the damage and try to clean up. We were at a hospital yesterday. They told us that one of the top injuries they see at their trauma center is actually chainsaw accidents, people using chainsaws for the first time to try to cut down branches and debris. They also get injuries from people who fall off ladders and come in contact with downed power lines. So the mayor says people must shelter in place, stay inside. They are told by officials it is safe to go outside. The biggest concern in the Orlando area is the wind and tornadic activity. There's already been a tornado warning just east of here, about an hour away. So the mayor says even though it seems for now that Orlando has been spared a direct hit, she doesn't want to take any chances. Jeff?
Adriana, thanks. We've seen those tornado warnings here in the Tampa Bay area as well. Manuel Bojorquez is across the peninsula. He is in Fort Lauderdale. Manny, we've seen the pictures of some of the wind there. It is just incredible right now.
Yeah, these are some of the strongest sustained winds that we are seeing so far as Irma continues to batter this area. They come and go. Right now, not too bad. And then you get this gust. I want to walk over here to show you that we're starting to lose tree branches and palm tree fronds left and right. If you take a look just above, you can see what some of the upper level winds are doing right now to those palm trees. They have been swaying for hours now as they're losing palm fronds, and they've been falling many times into this canal right here. What's important to point out here is that it is rising. The water level here as the waves are being whipped up by the winds here in North Fort Lauderdale. Also, as you mentioned, the threat here isn't just the high winds and the rain, but there are also tornado watches and warnings throughout the state, including right here in Broward County. The National Weather Service did say there was one report of a tornado touchdown yesterday. Our phones were going off with alerts pretty much all night. So on top of a long night for people here in the Fort Lauderdale area, you will have a long day because of what we're seeing right now. There will be wind damage. There will be some flooding, and that is the big concern. Law enforcement right now not going out into these elements. They stopped doing that when winds reached about 45 miles an hour, the wind gusts. And that actually happened yesterday, and this is supposed to be an all-day event. Here we go again with another one of these really strong wind gusts. The winds here are expected to reach up to 75 miles per hour, what would be the equivalent of a Category 1 hurricane. And we've talked about this before, the perspective here that we aren't really near the Eyewall, which is where the strongest impacts of the storm will be. We're about 90 miles from where it came ashore, and you can see the strong impacts that we're seeing here in the Fort Lauderdale area. There are 15,000 people right now in storm shelters riding this out. That's what officials had wanted to see, but they're not taking any more people right now. There is a curfew in place because they don't want people out in these elements. Jeff?
Later today,
Manny, thanks very much. You can deal with these
are going to
relative moments.
Force winds upwards of as high as 130 miles an hour, according to the latest estimates. And that storm surge, the most of that storm surge, which is going to come after it. I just saw a rescue vehicle, I believe it was the fire department, crossing over the bridge over the Hillsborough River. So there are still rescue personnel, first responders out there on the streets, and authorities here, the mayor of Tampa, have told people. This is the time. The clock is nearly struck noon in terms of your ability to get to a shelter. This is the time. If you are going to try to get to a shelter, the clock is running out. You need to do that now. But this is just going to get worse and worse over the next couple hours. I want to show you something that our affiliate reporters from WSN saw on Brickell Avenue in Miami a short time ago. Let's take a look.
it is getting worse by the moment. And that storm surge, so important to mention. Look at this street here down below us. We have parking decks and a tree, massive tree that just fell out. We're in the parking deck, so we're a little bit protected from the elements, but this is what's going on. And then you have these cars right here. And this is going to be the major problem that we're seeing. By the moment, this water is coming in from the Biscayne Bay, actually. So we're just not too far from where you guys are located, actually, up on North Bay Village. We're down in Midtown here in Miami, and you can see the water just coming in from the bay, which is just behind these buildings here. And it's going to be a major problem, and you can see it happening before our eyes here. This tree was up just about 15 minutes ago, and then all of a sudden it just topples. And these objects, of course, becoming projectiles in all of this as well, which is the other major issue out here as well. But we wanted to show you how this storm surge is impacting this area as well. I know it's impacting you guys up there in the studio here in Midtown Miami. Same deal. And then you have trees coming down as well. So quite the mess. And these cars will likely be underwater sometime soon. This water is moving in very fast, lapping over the seawall. The seawall, you can't even see it, actually, I should say. The waves are just crashing in onto the land at this point, and then this is the aftermath. So that's our story here in Midtown for now, but we'll send it back to you, ladies.
And dramatic there on Brickell Avenue. That was in Miami a short time ago. The rain now really coming down. I'm just wondering, for anybody in the Tampa area who is watching, do not come out. There's been a lot of people all throughout the morning who've come out, just wanted to check the water, walk around. It is really now starting to come down. This is the time you need to just stay at home. I want to check in with John Berman in Miami. John, high winds, a lot of water in Miami all throughout the morning. How is it now?
Yeah, same advice you just gave to the people of Tampa, Anderson. Don't come out. If you're in Miami, stay home right now, because we're starting to see a lot of developments that are concerning. You just played that affiliate video of Brickell Boulevard right there, the water coming up there. Our producer Glenn Dacey just drove over and said Biscayne Boulevard, too, has some parts with a whole lot of water on it right now. There is concern about the storm surge, and you can see behind me right now, again, there's that dock with the jet skis over there, the water lapping over it. What you can't see is these other docks that have already been covered. We've got about a foot and a half more to go for the water to come up to get on this cement that we're standing right now. If it comes up in anything close to that, we're going to get out. We're going to have to move. We're watching the storm surge very carefully. High tide here, we're almost there. It might be that this is as high as it gets. We can hope. But the rest of downtown Miami already seeing some water on the ground. And then, of course, the concern with the high winds, particularly in the high rises here. Earlier, they were getting gusts of 100 miles an hour. Want to listen in, I believe, right now to our affiliate. Let's listen in.
Hunker down. Don't come outside. Don't go down to your lobby. Don't go down to the first floor. Stay high up, and you should be okay. You probably still have power, and you're just going to have to ride this thing out and just hope that this water is going to recede at some point soon. But man, look at the wind whipping. I mean, you got white caps on Brickell. I mean, I don't know what more to say than that. It's a dramatic scene out here, Christine and Diana.
All right, Brian, and just to give people a perspective who aren't familiar with downtown Miami, this is not from the rain. How many blocks away are you from the bay? And did I hear you say, as far as the level of the water there, as far as how deep it is, possibly how high?
So the Miami police officer who I just spoke to said to him, in the highest areas, like in the middle of the intersection down there, he thinks that in the middle it could be getting up to his neck. So he I don't think he was exaggerating. It's definitely over the waist. There's no question it's over waist deep, because when I was walking in it a little while ago, and I backed off because it gets very, very deep. And we're probably, I would guess, 3 blocks from the bay. When it wasn't as deep, I was able to walk out there and look down one of the streets, and I could see a sailboat about 3 blocks away, and I could see it sort of moving in the wind. And it appeared that from where we are, all the way 3 blocks to the bay is underwater like this. I don't think there's any drive.
All right, you can hear about the concerns with storm surge now. Brickell Avenue here in downtown Miami. That's the story here right now, Anderson. Let's go back to you in Tampa.
Yeah, and I think what a lot of people don't realize is that storm surge that's going to come in the Tampa area, it may very well come, the worst of it may come after, even an hour or two after the hurricane force winds have hit at the hardest point. It is safe to say nobody alive in Tampa or in any of this area has ever seen a storm like the one that is headed toward this city, headed toward this area, headed toward the west coast of Florida. 1921 was the last time the city of Tampa was hit by a storm, the Category 3 range. Not a lot of people live there, but it did extensive damage at that time. So people anybody who thinks they know what is coming and knows what to expect, unless they have experienced this somewhere else, they've never seen it hit Tampa like this in the coming hours. Going to take a short break. Our coverage continues.
It was with a storm like this in mind that those codes were toughened. And this is the first major test of those new codes. How will this state, especially its new construction, stand up to a significant hurricane like Irma? So that is going to be very telling in the days ahead once the storm has passed and once we get a sense of what has been left behind and what has been taken away. The other issue here too is there are so many multiple levels of worry. Storm surge being an obvious one in an area that is so heavily coastal. But for instance, there was a worry here in Miami about construction cranes. There are a couple dozen cranes in the sky now in Miami. The city's going through a bit of a building boom. Those cranes are massive, very heavy. The counterbalance alone can weigh 30,000 pounds. The fear was that those cranes could topple. They are designed to spin in high winds, but the winds are only the cranes are only designed to absorb winds of 145 miles an hour. It does appear, of course, that those winds will not be as strong, at least here in Miami. But I've seen a video of at least one crane that appears to have toppled, not toppled to the ground, but toppled over. And that, of course, was a major worry. You don't want to be anywhere near one of those things if it collapses. So emergency officials have so many different levels of threats and risks to monitor all at once. And of course, there are bound to be surprises, both good and bad. The hope, of course, is that there are more good ones than bad ones. Jeff?
In Midtown after Superstorm Sandy, it's a dangerous situation that they're watching out for. But at this point, they just have to hope for the best because you're not going to secure those in anymore. It is a test for the infrastructure in Miami. It's an even bigger test right now for Tampa St. Pete, which does not have some of the same strict building codes, and where these buildings may be in even more danger today as we see Irma move up the coast. And we're just starting to get another wave here in the Tampa St. Pete area, which has not experienced the worst by far from what we've seen down the coast. People have largely cleared out from Tampa St. Pete. You do see occasional patrols. Actually, I see a vehicle on the beach right now making its way up, presumably sheriff or police. The beach behind us, we have about 100 yards to the water here. As we've been saying, that water is going to get pushed out first from that storm surge, and then it's going to get sucked back in. And the storm surge, again, being what will probably be the biggest threat, followed by the wind and then also the rain. I know Eric Fisher, who's chief meteorologist at our Boston station,
area, and he joins us now from downtown Tampa. John?
What's it like up in Orlando where you're at right now? You know, because we're starting
Anthony, let's talk about one of the specific vulnerabilities here in Tampa. Much of the city, the downtown area is vulnerable, but this is Tampa General Hospital. It sits right here. The hospital is not being evacuated. It has about 1,100 beds, some 900 patients still there when the winds here rise to tropical storm level. Now, it's low tide here now. When the storm surge comes in, however, when the storm surge comes in here, another important facility could be threatened, and that's the Tampa Convention Center. Now, even if the Convention Center survives the flood, all events planned there into next month have now been canceled, and it may take even longer than that for Tampa to clean up, depending on what hits us here over the next 24, 36 hours. Anthony?
John Blackstone in Tampa. Thanks, John. We want to go back to Jeff Glore now, who's just gotten a pretty ominous morning from where he is in St. Pete.
Yeah, Anthony, we just heard from the sheriff who said that when this storm passes, they are going to seal off the county. Nobody in, nobody out until they do a damage assessment. They are going to seal off this county once the storm passes to make sure that it is safe to move around. They're worried about trees being down. They're worried about everything being thrown into the road. They are worried about so much, as Irma has yet to bring her worst into the Tampa-St. Pete area, where we're expecting these tropical storm force winds probably between 2 o'clock this afternoon.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper. This is State of the Union. You're watching breaking news coverage now. The eye of Hurricane
of hurricane force winds. I am standing next to a steel rail, so Mom, holding on. But we do want to show you what it's like here, because in part we want people in the West to understand what is coming your way and what we are experiencing here in Miami Beach. It's being viewed by the city as really dodging a major bullet here. We have not seen a storm surge. There is hurricane force winds. It is very strong. You can see that signs have toppled over. And I want you to take a look down the street. A major concern here is flying debris. You can see all those branches. All of that has been flying through the streets. We've seen some of it in the form of broken street signs. So that is a major concern. But trying to stand upright is almost impossible if you're not standing next to something. So this is a reason why the Miami Beach Police Department and the Fire Department say that they are no longer able to respond to calls. You physically cannot respond to calls as emergency personnel without putting yourself into danger. That's why there was a mandatory evacuation. We have heard from the police and fire. They themselves are hunkered down because they simply cannot respond to any sort of emergencies. As far as what they did overnight, though, Jake, they did try to put out some fires. They did try to make some immediate rescues, but we have not heard of any major injuries or fatalities, at least here in Miami Beach.
Okay,
so
Kyung,
what we are expecting for the next few hours, yes.
just hold on 1 second, because I want to bring in John Berman, who is right next door in Miami. And I want to keep both of you with us right now. Berman, tell us about where you are right now.
I'm in the wind, Jake. The wind is gusting pretty fiercely here. I'm in Miami, close to downtown Miami right now, getting some pretty fierce gusts. Two things happening in downtown Miami we need to tell you about. Kyung-la out there in Miami Beach not getting storm surge. We are getting it here. There were pictures we showed just moments ago on CNN from Brickell Boulevard. Water waist deep in some places there. Biscayne Bay has broken through in some areas and starting to flood the streets. The wind just pushing the water up into the streets. And behind me, I don't know if you can see right now, those jet skis, the water lapping up over that dock right there. There are all these docks you can't see that have been covered by water, and the water creeping up ever so slowly here. We're watching it very, very carefully. The other story in downtown Miami is the wind. All morning we were getting reported wind gusts of more than 100 miles an hour in the tops of high rises, and that now has had a consequence. This crane collapse, or crack, depending on how you want to call it, at 300 Biscayne Boulevard. That crane, the boom, has sort of fallen off the rest of the crane, appears to be resting on top of this building under construction right now. We don't know if it's still attached in any way, whether by cables or anything else, but there are dangling cables around there. City officials telling people not to go anywhere near that area. Frankly, if you were smart right now in Miami, you'd be inside. There's no reason to go outside, not with the winds blowing the way they are, and not with these reports now, Jake, of storm surge on some of the main streets here in the downtown area. The areas, by the way, where there were mandatory evacuations because they were worried about just this type of thing, Jake.
All right, John Berman, stay with us. I want to go to Chad Myers in the CNN Severe Weather Center. Chad, give us the big picture perspective on what we see going on. We saw Kyung-La in Miami Beach taking the brunt of it when it comes to wind. We see John Berman in Miami getting wind and also storm surge. What is going on?
I will try to be brief because I have stood where those people have been standing in a hurricane and know how annoying it is for someone standing in a dry studio to keep talking when you're getting blasted. Miami going to see wind gusts probably now in excess of 15 miles per hour, greater than where you are now. Key Deer International Wildlife, that would be Big Pine Key, that is 120 miles per hour. Miami International, 94. The higher you go up in elevation across those buildings, the higher the wind goes. Here's where the wind is right now, right through Key Biscayne and into Miami Beach. Our Kyung-La is there. Kyung, I know it looks bad right now for you, but your winds are going up 20 miles per hour from here. I need you in a safe place.
Kyung-La, you heard that?
We are standing next to, yes, we are standing next to the Betsy Hotel where we're staying. There are some safe barriers. I have a steel rail that I'm holding on to. There's no projectile that I can see that's heading our way. But what I can tell, oh my goodness. Okay, so this is incredibly, and I'm just gonna call it, this is stupid. These two guys going out in the rain and in these storms. First of all, I don't know how they're staying up on two wheels. Do not do that. They may be joy seekers, but that is absolutely unsafe. The Miami Beach police and fire have said if those two guys get injured, they will absolutely not be able to help them out. They stop responding to emergency calls. If you dial 911 here, they can't physically get to you. So if you are preparing on the west side for these hurricane force winds, remember, you've got to make sure that you are in a safe place, that you know what you're doing. Do not be riding your bicycle out here. The winds that we're experiencing here, it makes it very difficult for me to stand. If I didn't have this steel railing, I'd be flying. What you can see happening to these trees here, they're just blowing in the wind. When we were out here earlier yesterday, some of those trees, I don't know if it's those in particular, but there were trees up and down this particular street that had coconuts on them. Those are long gone because they've flown in the air. The debris is a major issue. The fire department told us overnight that they had transformers blow, they had some fires, a gas leak, people who had to be rescued out of an elevator. They tried to respond to as much as they could, try to help as many people as they could, but then all of this started. So, yeah, you know, you just want to try to stay inside if possible. And then for the west side, you see what we're going through. Part of the reason why we do this is to show you and to put it into perspective of what's coming your way.
And Kyung-La has been reporting all morning. It's been more than 3 or 4 hours that the city of Miami Beach announced that first responders will not leave. So if people like those cyclists or anyone else does get injured, sadly, they will be on their own. Chad Myers, back to you in the CNN Severe Weather Center. Where is the storm headed exactly at this point?
It is headed to Naples. It is headed to Everglades City. It is headed into the Everglades National Park. When it parallels Miami, that will be its closest approach. And what Kyung-La is experiencing now is about 80. When the storm gets closer to her, it will be 100. Berman, you've seen about 75 to 80 right now. You're going to 100 as well. The problem I have with your live shot is that water will still come up 2 to 3 feet, John. Where are you going to go?
Yeah, Chad, we're watching that very, very carefully. If the water does increase any much more, we will move inland to higher ground. We have a route planned out here, Chad. We do appreciate that. And again, you know, the winds here are already strong enough to topple that crane, Jake.
All right, Kyung-La is standing more safely off to the side there, and we thank her for that. Kyung, I don't know if you can hear us still. But feel free to stay out of the shot.
I can hear you. Hey,
yes. No, stay out of the shot. Kyung, stay out of the shot. Just tell us what you see, but there's no need for you to subject yourself to 80 mile per hour winds. John Berman, let me ask you, the storm surge, which is anticipated more where you are, and you say you're witnessing it, than in other parts of Florida. When that comes, and Chad, feel free to weigh in after John, when that comes, does it come gradually or does it come like a giant wave?
It comes gradually, Jake, but in some cases, like we saw in Brickell Boulevard downtown, it moves up gradually, but when it gets over a barrier, it will flow in fairly rapid fashion. But people have been warned about this for days and days, Jake. I mean, that area of Brickell Boulevard is in the mandatory evacuation zone. Hopefully people got out. That is why authorities wanted these areas clear. You know, they don't want you living in an island on a high-rise building right now when you can't get down past the first floor. So hopefully people did heed those warnings and move out. And as far as where we are, and Chad was talking about the fact that it may go up another 2 feet or so. Again, we've been watching it. This is, 3 feet higher than it was when we started. There's some tidal issues to work in here, but we've seen it coming. And if it does move up, or when it does move up, we will move to higher ground, Jake.
All right, good. And Chad Myers, I know from covering previous storms, I know what a 110-mile-per-hour wind feels like. It feels like your face is being ripped off your skull. I experienced that in a wind tunnel, not in an actual hurricane, but in a wind tunnel, to try to explain it to the public what it feels like. Randy Kay did that a few days ago. That is what the winds are going to be like where John and Kyung are soon enough.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, we're already at 90 now. Every gust is 90 miles per hour. Every time a cell comes on shore, a line of the outer bands comes on shore, that wind goes to 90 to 95. And then we may even get to 100 to 105. Here is the bay that we've been worried about. This is Biscayne Bay. Kendall, you're already seeing winds over 90. Easy, because you're closer to the eye. Before you go Coral Gables, again, easy, 90, 95. Then the farther you go west, the higher the winds are. But it's this open area here. Here's Government Cut, where the cruise ships park. This is all open through the Key Biscayne National Park. All of this water is pouring into Key Biscayne and into Biscayne Bay, across the bay and across and into Miami. And that's what's flooding now. This wind direction will not change for 2 to 3 more hours, and the water is going to continue to come up. We're at 3.5 feet right now, surge.
Chad, let me interrupt you for 1 second. You're talking about that surge, and we're looking at images right now from a CNN affiliate in downtown Miami, and the streets look like a river. That surge has arrived.
It absolutely has. Here's the map that I made 3 days ago. What we expect with a 6-foot surge. All of downtown Miami will be covered in this blue color that you see there. That's the water depth if the water goes to 6 feet. Right now it's 5.5. That's where the water is at this exact point, and still going up.
Berman, the water where you are, obviously the water is the deadliest force in all of this, as horrific as the winds are. It is the storm surge that ends up taking the most lives in hurricanes such as these. And where you are, you're seeing the water surge.
Yes, you're seeing the water rise slowly, Jake, and it's been rising slowly over the last several hours. What Chad was talking about right there is just where it overflowed some areas as it came up and rushed down into Brickell Boulevard. That's 5.5 feet, as Chad was saying. They've been predicting as much as 6 feet of storm surge, but there were mandatory evacuations for some 600,000 people in Miami-Dade County, Jake. And those 600,000 people were told to evacuate because of fears of storm surge. It's not the wind. You hide from the wind, you run from the water, because there's nothing you can do. Once the water starts coming, if you live in one of the bottom floors, the water is going to come in to your apartment. If you live on the higher floors, you won't be able to get out, and the first responders won't be able to get to you. Hopefully, again, most people did listen to those warnings and did evacuate. Some of the biggest evacuations this county has ever seen. People sheltering now inland, hopefully not heading to Tampa to shelter, because that's a whole other world of problems that you're going to get in the next few hours right now. But it is remarkable that all this has happened, Jake, even though the eye of this storm did not hit Miami. There's been concern about that. This storm moved west, heading for Fort Myers and Tampa. Not the worst of the storm, but we still damage that this huge, wide storm has caused and is still causing, Jake.
All right, let me go back to Kyung La, who's in Miami. And Kyung, we see in different parts of the city of Miami, where you are right now, streets have turned to rivers, that the water, the surge is coming and it's flooding parts of downtown Miami.
And I can't see that from where we are. What I can tell you is the last time I checked in with the Miami Beach Fire Department, they said that as far as massive flooding, that is not something that they have experienced as of yet. But as Chad pointed out, the stronger winds still have yet to come. When my producer, Tristan Smith, went over to the beach to check out the storm surge, he didn't see all that much, that the beach looked like it had been beat up, but we didn't see the massive 5-foot, 10-foot storm surge that was predicted. So, you know, what we are seeing and experiencing here right now is generally more wind. There was just a tweet by the police department asking people to remain inside because of the severity of the winds. And I also want to tell people who are watching this is that this is not the worst area to stand in. If you walk through some of the city streets, through the commercial districts of Miami Beach, the wind there is unbelievable. It has created wind tunnels because of the buildings. And that's where a lot of people, some of the people who live in high rises, live. People who have chosen not to heed the mandatory evacuation order. It's much worse over there. So it's far more dangerous in the commercial Miami Beach districts, and so that's why you're hearing so many, why you're seeing so many tweets from the police as far as the fire to please stay inside.
All right, Kyung-La in Miami Beach, where the winds are horrific right now and projectiles are a real risk. John Berman in Miami, the city proper, where it's both the wind and the water. John, the water behind you that you say has been rising over the last several hours, how close is it to ground level?
Well, look, so what this is a marina right now. So the marina slopes down to really the water's edge right now. And I'll walk over it. You can see this cement where it ends. I'm not going to get too close right now. After the cement, there is, 2 feet to the water right now. At low tide, there's probably 5 feet. So it's up 3 feet. And right there where you can't see, that rope, you see that rope? That's actually tied to a dock that normally is above the water right now. It's not above the water now, it's a foot underwater. So you can see the where the water has creeped up. Those jet skis, they're attached also to a dock where the water is lapping over right now. We actually have seen a dock detach off into the bay here. That's what we've seen in terms of water. As far as the winds, Jake, this is as strong as I've seen. I mean, the wind has not blown like this yet here in Miami. And Chad says we're going to see another 10 to 15 miles an hour over the next couple hours. That's going to be pretty strong. And again, remarkable given that the worst of the storm didn't even hit here, Jake.
And John, we know Kyung-La is covering the storm from the hotel. I mean, she's right outside the hotel, but she's staying in that hotel, and that is where she can get to safety at a moment's notice if need be. What about you? People at home are watching and they're wondering about you. How quickly can you get out of there, and how quickly can you get to a safe place?
Talking about my mom and dad, who are both watching right now, we have cars parked around the corner on slightly higher ground. This water get much closer, we will simply pick up our stuff. Our hotel is a block away. We have another safe location to go to as soon as we need to. Our camera undercover right now as well. We have a team here more protected by the wind a little bit than I am right now. But no, we have a plan. There is a way to do this. We're doing it safely. We're out here so people can see the danger, so they can understand why the officials in this city and state have told them to stay inside, or in some cases, told to evacuate and get to safer, higher ground, Jake.
And John, just to explain to the people at home, if the winds that you are experiencing right now are somewhere in the 80 to 90 mile per hour territory, tell us what that feels like. Tell us what the experience is like, and why it's dangerous, even beyond the storm surge, which is the most dangerous.
Well, you have to do this ridiculous dance, Jake, where you're leaning into the wind the whole time, and then when you're, or in some cases can swirl, so you're in one way and then the wind will come from behind you and push you around some more. That's not even the real concern. The real concern is projectiles right? I don't know how far I can go back here where the camera can still see me, but this right here is an awning that snapped off the building. That used to be up there. Now, we that way, so we knew we weren't going to hit by it. And down there, you can see two pieces of this metal flashing. That also has flown off the building. That's a giant spear. It would fly through the sky if you were standing behind it right now. You have to be very, very careful of that. And the rain itself, when it comes at you, at 70 miles an hour or more, it's not a pleasant feeling, Jake, I can tell you that.
No, it feels like little needles going into your face. Let's go back to Chad for 1 second. Chad, the people in Miami, not just John, and the people in Miami Beach, not just Kyung, how much longer are they going to be going through this? And we know this isn't even the eye of the storm. This isn't even the worst of it.
This is not the closest approach to the eye of the storm yet, so it still goes worse from here. Exactly. I would say we get this for another 6 hours before it even starts to go down. And that's the real reason we don't want you in your home if it's not a strong house. This is a long duration. This is not a tornado that goes through in 17 seconds and it's over. This goes on and on and on. Now I want you to just think about this for a second. Grab a cup of coffee and blow on the top of a cup of coffee and to try to cool it off. The waves that your breath makes will blow the coffee to the other side of the coffee cup. That's what's happening here. The waves, because of the wind, are blowing the ocean on the other side of the coffee cup. And there's our Kyung-Law right there. What's happening here, the water is piling up, but it's going around here through Government Cut, and it's piling here. So if we keep pushing the air from our coffee cup or the wind, it's going to pile up here. Not so much in Miami Beach because it's going to go around. Not so much on Fisher Island because it's going to go around. This is the area, right there is our John Berman. This is the area that's flooding right now. It's the Brickell area of Miami and also even farther to the north. We're seeing those now waves and storm surge numbers at about 5.5 feet. That's enough to get over some seawalls there in downtown Miami.
All right, Chad, thank you so much. We're going to take a very quick break. When we come back, we're going to check in with some people on the west coast of Florida, where the eye of the hurricane is headed. Keep in mind all this horror that we're seeing in Miami and Miami Beach. This isn't even the eye of the storm. The eye of the storm has gone through the Keys. We don't know exactly what the situation is like there, but we're going to now experience, the country's going to experience the eye of the storm hitting the west coast of Florida. Stay with us.
And really assess exactly what they need, but they know there's water over US 1. I mean, if you think about what do we have to do down there, we got to make sure we get US 1 open. There's one road down there, right? We got to get make sure all those bridges, survive this, because one bridge, then everybody south of the bridge is stranded. We've got to find out what the airports are like. So the storm is still passing there. The storm surge, we'll see how bad that is down there. But you can watch, what you see on TV, exactly what you're hearing from Miami. They've had a lot of wind, and they'll get the same storm surge as the storm moves north.
Sure. Up here in the Panhandle, obviously the storm's kind of taking people by surprise. I think even Tallahassee thought there was going to be a near miss a couple days ago. Now the city's in kind of the center of the cone. What preparations are being done as of right now, especially with gas? Because I know there's a bit of a shortage.
We have been working on getting gas into the state for this entire week. Unfortunately now our ports are closed, which were our primary ports for gas are Tampa and Port Everglades. We are the Corps here. We are working with them to make sure as soon as the storm passes, we can get those ports open to get fuel here. We will provide escorts again. Law enforcement escorts to the carriers to get to the gas stations as much as possible. I waived the fuel tax to see if we can get more gas into the state. We've done everything we can to get as much fuel here as possible. I know there's been lines, there's been outages, but we're going to work every day to keep doing it. It'll be really important to get the ports back open, and I know it's something that the ports have already talked to the Army Corps to make sure they know a process to get that done as quickly as they can.
Governor, in the immediate aftermath, after the storm is cleared out, well, especially for South Florida right now, the people that went to shelters, how long could they expect to either stay in place and wait to say here that their neighborhood is okay to at least check out or go back into?
Well, clearly every county is going to be a little bit different what happened in their county. If you're in the inner counties, if you're in the middle of the state, it's probably going to be a little bit different because of mostly wind and some rain. You won't have the storm surge. So what'll happen in every county, they'll try to get let people know what happened. I mean, but the issues that every family is going to deal with is, one, do you have power back? And if you don't have power, do you want to stay in a shelter? That's one. Two, we've got to make sure we have fuel for everybody. We've got to make sure we have water and food for everybody. So we've pre-positioned assets. FEMA's pre-positioned assets. We got to get those things as fast as we can to the southern part of the state. But all the assets for this, it's slowed down the fact that this has covered the whole state. And so as you try to move the assets down to the southern part of the state, we got to let this storm pass, so it's safe to drive on our roads and things like that. So everybody's going to have to be very patient.
In Hardin County, Governor, a sheriff's deputy was killed in a storm-related collision. What type of guidance is being given to first responders? Should they be on the road right now? At this point, when the storm's coming short.
So, in every county, if you talk to the sheriff's department, every county, the police department, they have protocols for when people are supposed to be on the road. As you know, in the middle of the storm, you can't drive certain vehicles because of the wind, and whether it's the wind or the rain. But in every county, they make those decisions.
Governor, it's been almost a week, 5 days at least, since we've been waiting for this storm, and now it's here. I know you've been all over the state. What kind of a toll is it taking on you, and what have you learned about the state and the people?
Well, one thing when you go through this, what you'll learn is you have a really good state emergency management team. I mean, Brian Kuhn and his team, they do a really good job. If you go around the state and whether you're talking to the emergency management officials locally or you're talking to the law enforcement, they're absolutely committed. Also, you have to be impressed with your National Guard. I mean, these are individuals that are showing up. They're coming on active duty when they don't know what's going to happen to their own family. The other thing is, I want to thank President Trump. I mean, I've talked to him pretty much every day, and I've talked to the FEMA administrator almost, I think, every day. And you've got FEMA officials here. People, but that's true for every federal agency. People are working hard. There's a lot of unknowns, and that's what you worry about.
Unfortunately, you can also see a few people also trying to walk through this water's not recommended, of course, but for people who are familiar, this is the area where the grocery store Publix is. Now, we've been trying to get the best position out here, Jake, to show you both the ponding and the surge. It's a little difficult just because there's a lot of trees down, there's a lot of debris. You can also see lots of water on this end, a lot of the skyline from Miami. You can see also here a lot of these residential buildings, but this is a huge problem, of course, for Miami because these roads are ponding. They are receiving a lot of surge from the ocean. I'm about 3 to 4 blocks from the ocean, and you can see that ponding is occurring, surge is coming through, and the 16 counties in South Florida have a system of about 2,100 canals, 2,000 berms and levees that protect the city. Those structures have to work to drain all this water. So a huge feat, Jake. Irma testing the structures here in Miami and also testing the decisions made by people, both by public officials and people who decided not to evacuate when an evacuation order was issued. Jake?
And Rosa Flores, we're also seeing these images from our affiliate WSVN that show a street in downtown Miami basically having turned into a river. Do you know how far away that is from where you are?
That is probably a few streets down. We're a few streets down from Brickell Avenue. We're trying to creep closer and closer. But I'm not sure if we're able to zoom in, but you'll see raging water behind me in the street that's behind me. And again, just to give people a sense of where I'm at, I'm in Brickell and right next to the Publix grocery store. Now, this is both a combination of high winds, the winds pulling the water, ponding and storm surge. That's the big issue, that all of these three things converge and it creates a huge problem. The other thing too is that the drainage system has to work in order for this water to come down. There's a lot of debris, there are trees down. A lot of the times that blocks drains. So even if those drains were working right now, they're being stopped because of it. Now, the South Florida Management District did decrease the levels of the canals, Jake, that weave through the 16 South Florida counties that drain out into the ocean. They lowered those water levels to make sure that there was capacity for those canals to take a lot of the water that you see around me and flush it into the ocean. But when you combine surge, these high winds, and debris that are blocking those drains, it's very difficult for the system to do what it's designed to do.
All right,
Jake?
Rosa Flores, stay safe. She's in the Brickell neighborhood of Miami, the financial district. Let me go to Chad Myers, who's in the CNN Severe Weather Center. Chad, was flooding this bad expected?
Yes, it was. No question about it, Jake. Earlier, the numbers were somewhere between 6 and 10 for Miami, but that's when Miami was getting a direct hit from the eye, or at least a closer hit. And that was about, I would say, 40 to 50 miles farther to the east compared to making landfall over there by Cape Coral and on up toward Punta Gorda as we start to flood the other side. But what's going on right now is the wind is pushing the water into Biscayne Bay and eventually over what is a seawall, but it's very short, and into downtown Miami. That's exactly what we thought when the winds were going to blow this way for such a very long time. Now we have about a 3-foot surge in Miami, but the wind also is pushing this way on the other side. We have a 4-foot inverse surge in Naples. The water is down 4 feet from mean sea level, and that will rush back in as the eye goes by, and then the water will rush out of Miami. But for now, we have at least 5 or 6 more hours of Miami with this water rushing on shore, pushing in the same direction, more rain trying to drain out. That's never going to drain because the wind is blowing from this direction so hard. And then eventually we get up toward Tampa, Sarasota, Anna Maria Island. This is where we're going to see the significant wind damage too. Wind 125. What we're showing you on TV is like 70, 75. And I know Berman was kind of in the wind, but I know he was sheltered because I've stood in that same exact spot. So I know there's kind of a little building there to protect him a little bit, but still all of that debris that was blowing around near Berman, we had to get him out of there. So at least now he's in a safe place. Up to the north, we're moving you now to 8 o'clock tonight. Significant wind in Melbourne, India Atlantic Beach too. And then Tampa, you're right in the middle of this thing. This is what I'm really worried about. So many millions of people, somewhere in the ballpark of 110 to 120 mile per hour winds, with wind pushing the water out of Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay may eventually almost empty. And then the storm goes by and it fills back up rather quickly, a surge coming from the other direction after the water has already left. Please don't go into any water. If the water has left, don't go onto that land where water should be, because that water will be back, and it will be back higher than it was when it left. Jake.
Indeed. In fact, don't leave. Don't go outside.
Right.
Chad Myers, thank you so much. I want to go to Chris Cuomo right now, who's in Naples, one of the towns where the storm is headed. Chris, describe, if you can, for us how conditions have changed just in the last few hours.
Snotty. The wind is picking up. The gusts are measured in excess of 70 miles an hour. The rain has been constant. This is what the vets would call the snap, crackle, and pop phase of the hurricane. You're starting to hear these eerie sounds as branches and part of the structures start to give away. You hear the crackle of the transformers as they start to fail, and you're starting to hear the sounds of the trees falling around you, and it's a little eerie because you have to figure out where these sounds are coming from so you can assess the risk of where they'll fall. And the real problem is, as you were just hearing from Chad, we're still in the measuring blows phase for the West Coast. The water here has been sucked out as well. Ed Lavandera took a drive down to the Gulf side, down a few streets this way. The water has receded significantly, and when it comes back and the energy and the momentum of the storm surge, that's where this situation is going to get very serious here. The other problem is duration. This storm moving as slowly as it is, that means it stays in each area that it hits longer. And that's my concern here, is that all of these trees that are starting to sway in all these parts of these buildings that are getting hit hour after hour, what will happen when this wind almost doubles in terms of the gust? That's the concern from here, Jake.
And Chris, tell us how Naples has prepared for this storm. Have residents taken the evacuation order seriously? We were checking in with Kyung La in Miami Beach just a few minutes ago, and there were two, let's be charitable and call them thrill seekers, literally riding their bikes in Miami Beach. And obviously, Miami Beach hours ago, first responders announced that the winds were such that they were not going to be able to go out to save anybody. How are people in Naples hearing the risks?
Nobody's going out. The first responders can't risk it. You know, they are the best of us, as you know. You do such a beautiful job of focusing on their efforts in these situations, Jake. They just can't risk it. The best of us have to be there for the rest of us. So you can't go out in these conditions because you don't know when something's going to fall. Just over my shoulder, this huge tree just went down a little while ago, and they go down unannounced. Trees only go down slowly in movies and when lumberjacks are chopping them down. In these storms, they go down really quickly, so the first responders have to be careful. The city manager was here. They have a good plan, and they got lucky. This is a little bit of a snowbird place, Naples, and it's not as heavily populated right now. And people took early cues and got out of here. So they believe they're significantly evacuated, and that's a good thing. But it's also low-lying, and it is spongy, and there's a lot of it that can get really damaged. That's why Ed Lavandera went down to see what's going on with the water getting sucked out and what that predicts in terms of what we're going to see with storm surge when all that water comes back, as Chad Myers has been instructing us. Ed, can you hear us?
Hey, Chris, I can hear you. We are driving along the western edge of Naples. This is an area that is under mandatory evacuation. You can see the scene here. This is we're about a block off of the water here, and you know we're probably won't be able to do this for much longer here as the conditions have continued to deteriorate. But as we drive along this street here, you can see just even on the initial stages and the early bands of this hurricane as they start approaching southwest Florida, you look out onto the streets. This is exactly how things are quickly falling apart here on this particular street that we're on. You can see the trees that have already started coming down. There's one up ahead here on our right that we're going to have to manage our way to get around here. And this is already starting to be seen all through the city of Naples here. So this is a situation we won't be out here much longer. So this is a down tree here. And we've seen several along this stretch. You can see another one right here off to your right as well. So again, this is just the initial bands of this hurricane as it is several hours away from making landfall here in southwest Florida. And this gives you a pretty good sense of just how quickly things are going to deteriorate and how dangerous the situation outdoors will be even here in probably the next 7 to 8 hours, Chris.
All right, it's Jake Tapper picking it up from here. Ed Lavandera, please get someplace safe. Chris Cuomo, we thank you as well. We're going to squeeze in a quick break. When we come back, we're watching the flooding in Miami. We're watching the outer bands of Hurricane Irma as it begins to hit the west coast of Florida. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
And 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. Hurricane winds probably starting around 7 o'clock tonight and lasting about 8 hours. 7 to 10 up to a foot of rain, inches of rain, and then that surge and remains one of the big questions. Not just what direction the surge goes in depending on where the wind is moving, but how high that surge is going to be. Is it going to be 5 feet, 8 feet, 10 feet? Right now the expectation is that in the Tampa-St. Pete area, it'll be about 5 to 8 feet. But again, this area has not seen a major hurricane since 1921. The population of the Tampa Bay area at that time was 135,000 people. It is nearly 3 million people today. It has changed drastically since then, and the entire region is waiting to see what happens now. Jonathan Vigliotti is also along the Gulf Coast. He is south of us. He is in Naples, which is also going to get it, we expect, very bad. Jonathan?
Yeah, that's correct. And Jeff, right now we're having gusts measuring around 60 miles per hour. They're so fast that the sheriff's office is saying all emergency vehicles are now cleared from the roads. They will not be returning to the streets until that wind dies down, until the storm has long cleared. Concern.
I am in touch with several of our neighbors. We keep checking in. We do have one neighbor that has the type of generator that kicks in immediately after losing the power. And they have indicated, feel free to come by if it gets to be too much for you once the power has gone out.
Okay. Yvonne Pandolfo, thank you so much for letting our viewers in on what you're experiencing there. We wish you the best of luck.
Of Florida, and in many cases those areas are only a couple of feet above sea level on average. Flooding is going to be one of many major worries. Another issue, of course, is loss of power. 1.3 million Floridians are now without power in South Florida. That number is guaranteed to rise, and in some cases those outages could go on for weeks, is the fear. 911 responders are still not answering calls. It is simply too dangerous for them to go out once the winds hit 40 miles an hour. That was the threshold beyond which first responders would not venture out themselves, and we passed that threshold hours ago. Mark Strassman, CBS News, Miami.
Yeah, you can really see that storm surge, and what we're really looking at is downtown Miami and the potential for storm surge there, which would be a very expensive losses there. Thankfully, it looks mostly
It continues to batter this area, and until it clears, we just don't know how much damage is out there. We're in a safe spot, but we can't really leave this spot to go out and check anything out. And of course, we wouldn't do that. Never want to put ourselves in harm's way and become the story, because we know the sheriff stopped going out here at 45 mile an hour sustained winds, and that was some 12 hours ago, Shepard.
Adam, eventually this storm's going to head to Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay itself is largely dry. Lillian with some video from Tampa Bay now.
Yes, this was taken earlier today, and you can see this Bay area has
shelters
been cleared
are open.
out.
We are
very,
told that
very
they are
eerie.
maxed out with about 15,000 people. Officials are warning anybody that's choosing to ridden out this storm in their homes to seek higher ground. Jonathan Vigliotti, CBS News, Naples, Florida.
All right, that's Jonathan Vigliotti reporting there from Naples, where you can see the conditions there are deteriorating as we speak. This is still, folks, a Category 4 hurricane.
CNN's breaking news coverage of Hurricane Irma. The extremely dangerous core of the storm is headed for the southwest Florida coast. It made landfall through the Florida Keys a little over 3 hours ago. It's a Category 4 storm. It has 130 mile per hour sustained winds, and it's now expected to track up Florida's west coast. Among the cities now facing the greatest danger, Tampa, Florida, and that's where we find CNN anchor Anderson Cooper. Anderson, we've seen the outer bands of this hurricane hit Miami. Chris Cuomo's in Naples. He's starting to feel some of that as well. What about where you are in Tampa?
Yeah, you know, people have been watching the coverage here in Tampa, seeing those images on Brickell, for instance, in Miami with that water, just incredible pictures, that water rushing down the street. That is a hint of what is to come here in Tampa. This is a city that has grown up so fast over the years, a lot of buildings very close to the water, and they have not experienced a storm of this magnitude, a Cat 3 storm, which is what is expected to be when it hits Tampa, since 1921. It severely damaged the city back then. It obviously was not a very developed city. There weren't a lot of people living here. There was only one fatality. But, you know, we heard Chad Myers earlier talking about the water in Tampa Bay being sucked out. This is the Hillsborough River. And I just wanted you to show this water is moving out toward Tampa Bay. And as we have been here over the last couple hours, we've been watching the water actually go down. You can see on the other side of the river, you can kind of see a sandy embankment. We couldn't see that when we first came out here a couple of hours ago. And as Chad pointed out, importantly, all that water that's going out, that's going to rush back in along with that storm surge. It was expected to be 5 to 8 feet yesterday. We're still waiting. We have no idea how much that's going to be. And with the winds, waves on top of that, so how much water is going to be coming is a huge question. Even in the best of times in Tampa, they've been, in a heavy rainfall, they've been having problems with flooding and getting rid of that water. The same in St. Petersburg and the surrounding areas. There's 700 miles of coastline around Tampa Bay. It gives you a sense of so many houses built along those 700 miles of coastline. With all that water, the damage could be extreme. I want to go to the mayor, Bob Buckhorn. Mayor, you have been raising red flags about this. I saw a quote from you, I think it was last year. You were standing on the steps at City Hall, and you said if a Category 3 storm directly hit Tampa, that area in downtown would be under 15 feet of water. How concerned are you about the flooding potential in Tampa?
Anderson, I'm hugely concerned. I mean, that is our worst nightmare. We are about to get our own version of what hell looks like over the next 24 hours. Between the winds and the rain and
all the hurricanes I've been in, I still haven't seen anybody walking around. Thank God they're not trying to walk in this stuff. Out there right now, a big tree has come down, another tree over there. Again, and this is the area that's the newer part of Key Largo, so the building codes obviously were all followed. We just don't know what we're going to find when we get to some of the older areas, some of the mobile home areas. You hope people didn't try to ride this thing out, Shepard, because as you can tell from the video, it just continues to batter us here.
It has. A quick update for our viewers. This from the Jacksonville area from the National Weather Service. There is a tornado now. It's a water spout at the moment. The National Weather Service says it's expected to move ashore as a tornado in Crescent Beach, Summerhaven, Marineland. That's in the Jacksonville area between now and 1 o'clock Eastern time. So over the next 30 minutes, a severe storm and tornado warning now. Crescent Beach, Summerhaven, Marineland. If you are in those areas, get to a safe space. The National Weather Service believes a tornado is headed your way. Adam, lots of violent tornadoes out of this thing.
Yeah, Shepard, and it makes sense why. I mean, you see the winds, while it's still coming from my right, you're starting to see them to swirl, so I got to believe that means it's starting to switch out. As you were talking about the other areas, I'm looking at over here, you're talking big pieces of metal now, Shepard. 6 feet by 4 feet, that one looks like just twisted and blew into a tree down here to my left. As I look back out behind me, you see parts of roofs torn off. And again, these are the newer parts of the area of Key Largo where we're located. And we're not near the eye as much as Key West was. And some of the video we've seen out of there is just brutal. And as you go south Isla Mirada and other places, we've been told they're getting hammered as well. You know, no way that anybody can go out and help anybody in this. And we know that the emergency services here said they would stop at 45-mile-an-hour sustained winds. And again, that was a long time ago. But Shepard, I know you see the video. We can't see the actual. We can't see the actual. Holy smoke! We can't see the radar. You're saying it's passing us. We still haven't had that switch yet. You can tell it's still coming from my right to my left, which is basically east to west, Shepard.
Sounds like it won't be long now. Adam, your pictures are amazing. We've been watching in downtown Miami, and just moments ago while you were speaking, we were also watching in northeast Miami-Dade County, where the waters have just been kicking up very high. This is dangerous. This is in Miami itself. Turn around, don't drown is what the National Weather Service is asking us to remind our viewers. If you're out and about in this, they say you shouldn't be. And if so, waters are rising across South Florida now, just as predicted. Storm surge is coming in. And as a result, Their plea is turn around, don't drown, because the waters are coming up so quickly, as they are in the Brickell section of Miami. Some live pictures through WSVN 7 there. Let's look.
So they're not even that close to the water. And look how far, Diana, that water has made it, and look how high it's gone.
And one perspective that we can give.
High, it's gone.
And one perspective that we can give you, I don't know if you can see.
Particularly strong gusts. Sorry, guys. There's another sign behind it that is completely toppled. No structural damage at the hotel that we're staying, just minor, but it's some of the awnings that are on the roof of the hotel, and it's just getting more and more intense here.
Deployed throughout the hurricane zone. Manny Bojorquez is in Naples, which could get a big brunt of this storm and is already getting that right now. Actually, we're going to go to Manny Bojorquez is in Fort Lauderdale. Manny?
We're told about this. Everyone had concerns about this beforehand, but some of those cranes they weren't able to get out in time. So they told everyone, if you're living near a crane, this is especially urgent to evacuate.
Yeah, this is a dangerous situation, of course, but we have been talking about this for days. There are about 24 of these cranes spread out around Miami-Dade County. There are a lot more up in Broward County and Palm Beach County. That's the sort of that goes along with the boom in development that we have experienced here. That's the good part of it. The bad part of it is that when a storm like Irma moves its way through, these cranes can really become killers under certain circumstances. And so we're going to keep our eye on this situation, and we'll update you as we learn more about the building manager and the company that owns this building and is operating that crane to let you know when they're going to be able to get up there to try to fix this situation.
Yeah, and right now we want to go to Hank Tester. He has been out here taking a live look right now at Fort Lauderdale. You see the water on the camera there, and you see it also shaking, an indication that it is very windy there. The skies are gray, and it is not the time to go outside.
Yep, I've got some friends in Fort Lauderdale who have told me that this is now the strongest winds that they have felt in Fort Lauderdale. These gusts that are coming through right now and over the last 20 minutes or so are the strongest that they've experienced in the storm right now.
Okay, so Hank, our coverage of devastating Hurricane Irma as it begins to plow through Florida. Strong, dangerous winds continue to increase over all of southern Florida. The streets of downtown Miami are now flooding. Brian Todd is enduring the wind of one of the outer bands of the hurricane. He's in West Palm Beach on the east coast of Florida. Brian, what are you going through there?
Well, Jake, we're inside the window now of the most intense hurricane force activity that we're probably going to get for the next several hours. We are dealing also with tornadic activity. We're told that pop-up tornadoes are going to be hitting us for much of the day, and it feels like we're getting some of that now. But if you look behind me, look at the wind here. Look at the intensity of the wind. That palm tree there looks like it could come down. These palm fronds that are flying from these trees have, along with the coconuts, have become projectiles. We've had to make our way around some of those. And if you see over here, we're going to walk a little bit from my left to your right. These street signs here are really wobbling. They could become uprooted any moment. Now we're getting pelted with a really heavy rain squall. These stanchions that are supporting the traffic lights are wobbling. I just talked to the mayor, Jerry Moyo, the mayor of West Palm Beach. She is fearful that this street, Flagler Street, along the Intercoastal Waterway is going to get flooded. We see some water on the street now, but we're just now getting to the beginning of the wind activity and the storm surge on the Intercoastal Waterway, which is just over here. I'm going to walk toward it a little bit. If we can stay standing, we're really getting nailed here with some intense wind and rain. Also, Jake, I just talked to a fire official, one of the top fire chiefs of West Palm Beach. He said that they have, I asked him about the construction cranes that are right near here. We might be able to get a glimpse of one over my left shoulder. There's one right up there. People here have been very concerned about that, especially since we reported that crane cracking in Miami. The fire chief tells us that they have just done a survey of these cranes. They're okay for now. They're monitoring them closely. But there are apartment buildings right next to these cranes, Jake, some people in these apartments have evacuated, others have not. So we're going to be looking at those cranes pretty closely.
All right, Brian Todd, and let me bring in meteorologist Bob Ryan, past president of the American Meteorological Society. What goes through your mind when you're watching this Hurricane Irma? You've covered dozens of hurricanes. Is this one more severe, more frightening than previous?
I think with the population growth that we've seen in Florida and along the coast, and also the number of people who have never experienced something like that, that's the danger. Forecastable, and as we heard, all of the authorities taking all the proper steps for preparation. But you can't prepare for something that's once in your lifetime. Folks that have gone through this or going through this will probably never take a second chance.
And what is it about Irma that makes it a once in a lifetime storm? Obviously,
the size,
the magnitude of it.
I think when Senator McCain was here, he said it's the size of Arizona. So you had hurricanes like Andrew, which was a ferocious storm, but smaller. This is a monster, which is actually continuing to draw in moisture from Cuba and from the Gulf of Mexico. That's why the east side, Chad talked about, the east side is so dangerous, and that's why Miami is getting it so bad. But the Eyewall, the heart of that storm, is still yet to go into Marco Island and on the west coast. So it's going to be a long day, a long night.
Yeah, as devastating as this is just the beginning. And Bob, let me show you those pictures from WSVN, if we could put those back up on the left side of the screen of downtown Miami flooding those streets that look like a river. I mean, this is just unbelievable. This is in downtown Miami.
And it's 100 miles. It was 100 miles away from but those east to southeasterly winds, as Chad, just continue to pile it up. And on the other side, the west side, if the core goes just to the west of Tampa, once those winds shift around, it could be like almost a tidal wave of water coming in later on tonight. And unfortunately, 2, 3, 4, 5 o'clock at night in the morning when it's dark. Any attempts at rescue will be just terrible.
It's a devastating storm, and we're just beginning to see the start of it as it starts barreling through Florida, even though it is going on the west side of Florida because of the outer bands of this enormous hurricane. It is also affecting the east. Bob Ryan, thank you so much. Our breaking news coverage of Hurricane Irma continues as the storm roars through Florida. Stay with us.
This is a quest to explore the wonders of our world before
That's right. We have another one from West Inn. This is Vacation Village. This is from Francesco Cayeta. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. You see the trees just being battered there by the wind, and it looks like he is inside. Hopefully those are hurricane-proof windows. I'm sure they are. Thank you for sending this to us, too, from the balcony.
Let's take a look over a little east in Broward County, Cooper City, or south.
Cindy Schmidt has sent us this picture of tree damage, and I guess this is a yard in her neighborhood that the ground around here has been because of
and just
the
the power of that wind. The power, the force of that wind is just it's just incredible. And to give you an idea of how big it is, you can see there's like it looks like almost a two-story house behind it that you can barely see poking out the top, and that's on the tree when the tree is sideways. So it gives you an idea of how big and massive that tree was, and was still blown over. Hopefully not onto that house, but we can just barely see the roof peeking out over the top.
Thanks for that picture, Cindy, from Cooper City. This is from Sabrina Kreis, who is in East Fort Lauderdale, so she's right by the water, and she sent us this video and some nice landscaping outside there, Sabrina. I wonder how it's going to hold up as we take a look at these pictures from East Fort Lauderdale, where there has been a lot of wind and a lot of rain, and it's going to continue with those conditions, and they're going to be worsening as the day goes on. We saw Hank's shot just a minute ago from that report where there was a lull, and I think that the concern that a lot of officials have is that people will take that as a reason, as an excuse to step outside for a moment and to survey the damage that may have been done to their homes or to their neighborhood, just because there's a lull.
Things really heating up there in Miami with Hurricane Irma still a Category 4. That was our coverage from our Miami station, WFOR.
Here right now with CBS News weather producer David Parkinson with the latest on what is happening with Irma as it tracks its way up the western coast of Florida. So David, what's
ready? We've been ready.
Well, understood. I know how much
you know that there are really getting difficult
can be for municipalities along the west coast. You guys have been through this before.
Yes, sir.
Well, you don't want to be out anywhere in a storm. And all the hurricanes I've been in, I still haven't seen.
We've opened 10 shelters throughout the Lee County area, and right now housing approximately 30,000 people. Some of these were specific shelters designated for special needs and also pets. We had mandatory evacuations already done yesterday in our low-lying areas, our mobile home parks, our barrier islands, and we also had mandatory evacuation in an area we call our Area B, which is basically the area that lines the Caloochalachi River. And our officers are out there
watching and waiting. There are some of the outer bands of the storm have brought some light rains compared to what is to come, and people here know that. The story, the pictures that we have been watching out of Miami on Brickell Boulevard, water just pouring down the street. That's where we find our John Berman right now. John, I mean, you know, again, the people in Tampa who, you know, luckily still have electricity are able to watch some of those images that you've been bringing coming out of Florida, out of Miami. It's extraordinary what they have seen, and they know that is coming here and more and likely even worse.
Yeah, I hope they're watching and getting the warning that they should be inside, that they should heed the warnings, the calls to evacuate from the officials there in Tampa. Anderson, I'm holding in my hand parts of a plastic light that just snapped off a little bit down the way there and flew at me. I thought it was glass at first. Thankfully, it's not. It's just plastic. But you can see the debris is a real concern here. Not to mention the storm surge. You saw the pictures from Brickell Boulevard. You know, feet of water now during that, down that main drag in downtown Miami. Behind me, you can see the water lapping up over that dock, covering several docks here. The water has gone up several feet here right by the bay where I am standing at this point. We've also had serious issues, not just with flooding downtown, but also a crane, a partial collapse of a crane on Biscayne Boulevard. Rosa Flores has been watching it all in downtown Miami. Rosa.
Hey, John, here the headlines are cracking cranes, flooding, ponding, surge, and wind tunnels. That's what we're seeing. Now, take a look around me. This is a street now turned a pond. For people who are aware of where this area is, this is the Publix grocery store. I'm about 3 to 4 blocks from the ocean, and what we're seeing at this hour is the storm surge. Storm surge coming onto land, and then additional ponding because of the raining that's coming down and the streets not draining. Now, the other issue that we're seeing in this area, of course, are the cracked cranes. Those cranes, we were told, were supposed to sustain winds of up to 145 miles an hour. City officials said there was no time to remove them because they needed at least 2 weeks to remove them. Now we've seen the dangers, the failure of those cranes that, of course, are very close to high rises where people live. Huge concern, of course, because city officials asked those people to evacuate for that very reason. One of the other things that we're seeing here, people trying to walk through these streets, drive through these streets at this hour while Irma is here. That's what we're seeing, and that's what we're experiencing. I'm going to try to walk over here to see if we can take a look. This is closer to the ocean, and what we've seen is this water that keeps on ponding. Again, the storm surge coming onto Brickell. This is the financial district in Miami. Water on streets that are not supposed to be on the streets, of course. Ponding that is happening, and as more rain comes down, as more debris comes down, these drains are being plugged and the water does not drain off. Now, Miami needs to be drained on a normal day. So, John, when we are seeing surge, when we are seeing rain, when we are seeing debris clogged drains, a very serious issue, a very serious concern, of course, here in Miami as we continue to get pounded by rain and as the surge continues to come onto land. John?
Yeah, and the bad news there, Rose, is Chad Myers told us not long ago we'd expect 5 more hours of it here in Miami, and that's even before it goes up the West Coast where it could be even worse. Every time I feel like I'm suffering here in Miami as the wind comes down where I'm standing right now, I just think of Kyung La, who is out there on Miami Beach, which is an island, just off where I'm standing right here, who's getting it even worse than we are. Let's go to Kyung La out there if she can still hear me. Kyung.
John, it's the pelting rain and wind as conditions deteriorate out here at Miami Beach. It looks very bad. It feels very bad, but one thing we do want to tell you is that we just spoke with the mayor of Miami Beach, and he says that his city is in remarkably good shape, especially considering how much rain and the beating of wind that they're getting here. What they've seen are down power lines, debris, some overnight rescues before they had to call it. The city has been responding very, very well. He's very pleased. They have not had a massive amount of flooding here. The storm surge has been remarkably forgiving. We are seeing some water come in on the beach, but generally there hasn't been any major flooding here. So the mayor says the curfew will go back into effect tonight for anyone who remains here in Miami Beach. And something else that we do want to point out, even though clearly you can't get around in this weather, the mayor says that the bridge between Miami and Miami Beach, those connectors, those roads are being cut off. People are not being allowed in or out of an abundance of safety. John Anderson?
Kyung, thanks very much. I just want to give you a sense of Tampa. We're on the Riverwalk here, and we have been watching, and I want Chad Myers to see this because we're about to talk to him because Chad's been talking about this phenomenon. We have been watching this through the Hillsborough River, the water moving out into being sucked into Hillsborough Bay, then on into Tampa Bay. You can see the sandy embankment across the river. The water has lowered while we have been standing here over the last several hours, and of course, that water, once the storm surge starts to come in, all that water is going to come back. It's going to come back hard. And the flooding, the potential flooding here in Tampa is a major concern. I just talked to the mayor a short time ago. A year ago, he had warned of the effects of a Cat 3 storm directly hitting Tampa, something they haven't seen since 1921. He'd warned about the potential of 15 feet of water in downtown Tampa by City Hall. Again, that is going to be happening. Whatever water comes in, it's going to be happening in the darkness, in the nighttime hours. And Chad Myers, the Weather Center, that storm surge that we can expect here in Tampa and that people in Naples can expect and in Fort Myers, it's going to be happening most likely in the darkness and often, and correct me if I'm wrong here, hours after some of the biggest, the strongest hurricane force winds have come through.
No question about it. The surge will happen when you think the storm is over, because we're on the wrong side of what we always think about hurricane landfall. We're on the west side of an island or a peninsula, whatever. We're typically talking about an East Coast landfall, and the surge comes in with the eye. The eye is going to go by, suck out all the water, and then the wind is going to get calm, and then the wind is going to blow back here at 120 miles per hour. And when it blows back, it's going to blow back all of that water that's now just piling up offshore. It's called a very shallow area, kind of a shoal out there. There's a lot of sand. You can go on a boat for 40 miles before you actually find any depth out here. All kind of sand. That shallowness will push that water quickly back up in Tampa as the storm goes by. And yes, you're thinking, oh, this is finally over. But if you are by the water in Tampa, it is not over. Now, let's go back to what the mayor said. A direct hit by a Cat 3. What does that look like? A direct hit by a Cat 3 comes in off the Gulf of Mexico and slams into Pinellas County or something like that, so that the spin of the storm pushes all the water into Tampa. That is not what we're seeing here. This is not a direct hit. This is not a 15-foot surge. Our storm is coming in this direction. So we're going to push all the water out, then we're going to push it back in, but only 5 to 8 feet. And I think that's still a very good number. And the mayor was correct. If the storm is slightly offshore, then all of a sudden we could get more pushback and get a bigger number than 5 to 8. But right now, I think that's still a fairly good number. Now, down here in Naples and Fort Myers, 5 to 8 is not the right number. You guys, especially from Cape Coral, Punta Gorda southward, you're 10. And if you get south into the Everglades or close to it, you're 15. You need to get out of the way of this storm. Marco Island, I know there are people hanging out on that island. I don't get it. You need to be off there before it's too late. I know there's a long bridge, and at some point in time, that window is going to stop. You're not going to be able to get off the island at all. But, you know, the entire island is going to be covered up in water. There's just not going to be any roadway that's not wet with salt water. And then if you're in a high rise, and I know that's where people are staying, all your equipment downstairs is going to be wet. Everything electrical, everything HVAC, everything that you need to really be comfortable is going to be wrecked. And then you're still going to be on the island and you may not be able to get off. So that's all West Coast, because that's where the next focus is. Right now, the East Coast is still getting pounded, and that's where all of our reporters are seeing the surge into Miami, into Fort Lauderdale, all the way up the coast, anywhere along the intercoastal waterway. That's what's getting water now. If it's 2 to 3 feet, I think everybody can handle it. When it gets, in some spots will get 6 feet, then all of a sudden there's water in everything. Anderson.
Yeah, Chad, and we want to start checking in with those reporters on the east coast of Florida. Brian Todd is standing by in West Palm Beach. Brian, how are things there?
Anderson, we're getting pounded with some of the early stages of hurricane force winds here. We're now in the window in the next several hours where we're going to really get the most intense storm surge that this area is probably going to see. The storm surge is just allowing the water in the intercoastal waterway to pound up against that walkway there. And the mayor of West Palm Beach, I just talked to her on the phone, Jerry Moyo. She told me she's really concerned about flooding because the storm surge is going to come up a couple of feet at least. It's going to probably inundate this area with water. She's worried about this drive, Flagler Drive, getting flooded. There is some water over here. And the wind intensity has really picked up in the last, 15 minutes. These palm trees behind me are starting to get compromised. There's one over here that's leaning badly, and palm fronds and coconuts are becoming projectiles. They're starting to fly all over the place here. Just below it, you see these street signs wobbling, and even these sturdy stanchions behind me that have the street lights on them, they're starting to wobble a little bit. So that's a real concern. I also just spoke to a local fire chief who said that basically we're in the window now where if people call 911, they're not going to be able to come out and get them. It's just too dangerous for the first responders. That chief also told me, he said there's a big concern about the construction cranes, like the one in Miami that snapped or at least cracked. There's one over here. The chief assured me that these are secured, that the tops of them are pulling with the wind. He said they're supposed to do that. They're supposed to go around like a weather vane. They are pulling with the wind. He said they're in good shape, and he wants to reassure people of that. and he wanted to clarify something on our air. I think one of the experts said that we had said that people hadn't evacuated these buildings next to the cranes. Well, some people did evacuate. They were under a voluntary evacuation notice. Some of them got out, some of them did not. But the people who did not, who live in these apartment buildings, have told us they are now concerned that these cranes may hit their apartment buildings. But one of the assistant fire chiefs just told me right now they're confident they're going to stay in place. Anderson.
Brian, I appreciate that. And you know, a place like Tampa, and really in a lot of cities in Florida, they've seen such a real estate boom over the last couple of years. There are cranes everywhere. I mean, even here in Tampa, right by the Hillsborough River, we have 2 cranes over here, and they weren't expecting as big a storm as is going to be hitting Tampa. I assume those have been secured as best they can. Obviously, something a lot of people who live around here, who have stayed around here, are going to continue to watch because there are a lot of people who have stayed in some of these buildings. There's some high-rise buildings here. They're off. You know, they're above 15 feet or so, above 20 feet. They feel pretty confident. We've talked to a lot of people. There are a lot of people who are walking around right now because as one of the outer bands of the storm has passed by, the rain has really stopped. It's pretty calm. People are trying to walk their dogs, stretch their legs because they've been hunkered down in their homes, but again, they know what is coming. So does Chris Cuomo, who is down in Naples. Chris, you know, Chad was on just a second ago talking about potential storm surge, and Naples really is facing that potential of 10 to 15 feet of storm surge.
And that freaky phenomenon of the water getting sucked out by that, you know, that counterclockwise force where on the East Coast, the east part of the storm, the water is getting dumped back in and the energy is coming from the west side, you know, the left side of the storm. We saw that here. The water level has gone out. And Anderson, while I have you, that Project Phoenix about what could happen in Tampa Bay, that is some really startling stuff about the vulnerabilities of where you are in the development at water level and how the infrastructure is so old. A lot of those principles apply here. Everything has changed here, my friend. The difference in those like 200 miles between the two of us right now, this is all headed your way, of course, but it's really different here now. We're in that snap, crackle, and pop phase, you know, where the trees are starting to come down, the transformers are doing their thing, and you get in that eerie sequence of noises where you're trying to figure out what it is that's getting softened up. So you can calculate where to be and what's going to happen. I've been watching a couple of trees just went down away from us, and you're facing this way, and then you like get hit by a little bit of whatever's flying around on this side. So we're getting into that phase. But Naples hasn't seen anything yet in terms of what the major risks are for where we are, and even more significantly where you are.
Yeah, the Project Phoenix report, which Chris referenced, just for our viewers who aren't familiar with it, that was a report done kind of to predict the effects, I believe it was of a Cat 5 storm hitting Tampa. But again, even a Cat 3 storm is not something anybody who lives here in Tampa, who grew up here in Tampa, has ever seen before. 1921 was the last time a major storm like that hit directly in Tampa. As Chris, as you know, Hurricane Charlie back in 2004 was expected to come here. It turned at the last minute and really decimated Punta Gorda. There are a lot of concerns here, and the mayor has voiced them time and time again about the effects of flooding, about the effects of storm surge, even when there are heavy rains in Tampa, in St. Petersburg, in this area around Tampa Bay. They have problems with flooding, and over the years, the level of Tampa Bay has just naturally increased. So as those higher winds come in, there's more water in Tampa Bay now than in previous decades to come inland in part of that storm surge. So there's certainly a lot of concern, and it's justifiable concern. I mean, we don't want to, make things sound worse than they're going to be. But this is not a storm that anybody here in Tampa, unless they have lived somewhere else where Cat 3 has hit, has seen, and nobody has seen what it might do to this city, to Clearwater, to Hillsborough. You got to keep in mind there are some 700 miles of coastline around Tampa Bay. It's an extraordinarily beautiful area, and a lot of homes are built up very, very close to the water, not very raised up, not very high elevation off the water. So there's a lot of concern about what's going to happen, even where the mayor has a house in Davis Islands, which is just south of here by the Hillsborough River, by Hillsborough Bay. he said that his home might be destroyed. I mean, if there was a significant storm surge, his home might be swamped. We're going to take a short break, and our coverage continues.
So we're following our plan. Right now, we had to pull our emergency units off the streets because of the speed of the wind gusts, because we also are concerned about the safety of our officers. And
This
we're
rain,
right now
and as the storm gets going, it's going to get worse. People in Fort Myers are hunkering down and bracing for the rest of this onslaught. From Irma, Chris Van Cleve, CBS News, Fort Myers, Florida.
All right, Chris Van Cleve reporting there. This is a live look right now at Juno Beach, Florida. This is coming to us from surfline.com. You can see, check out those tremendous waves that are already starting, Stephanie, to bounce up against that pier there. And certainly, as we expect, as we have been reporting, this storm surge that could happen there, it has the potential to actually cover that the entirety of that pier. Let's take you now also to our station in Fort Myers, our affiliate, Wink TV. Let's listen in.
Just beating them up, and they were having such a difficult time doing it. There's exactly what he was talking about, and the gusts and the strong winds down in Naples. And at that time, I think, Jim, you said there was a 70 mile per hour wind gust at that point, but that is expected to get a lot worse in the Naples area as well.
It already has. We just had a report of a wind gust at Naples, 103 miles per hour. I want to show my radar if you can on my computer. I've got a couple of measurements I want to share with our viewers right now. All right, if you're listening on radio, I'll try to be descriptive here. If you're watching, it speaks for itself. The eye of Irma, we are measuring, is about 36 miles south of Marco Island. The northern edge of the Eyewall is 15 miles approximately. A little less actually, because I had to draw that line diagonally so it didn't overlap the other. So here's the math. We believe it's moving to the north at about 12 miles an hour. That means the Eyewall will have a chance to move over Cape Romano, Marco, Goodland, nearby Everglades City in an hour. Let's see here, in about an hour and a half. It's actually, I'll say an hour. We're at 1:30, about 2:30, if it indeed is moving at about 12 miles per hour. Now, the actual eye moving along at 12 miles per hour is now a little less than 36 miles away. That is still, as we've been saying this early afternoon, is expected to come on shore between 4 and 5. I would say if you had to pick a time, around 4:30. Of course, we will follow that, time it out, and let you know exactly. But already, triple-digit wind gusts are occurring. And if you live in the path of that eye wall, coastal Collier, coastal Charlotte, get ready. As we've been telling you, this is the day. 100 mile an hour or stronger gusts are coming our way.
All right, Jim, thank you.
We're ready to get out there and clear the road debris and respond to the needs we need to respond to.
Derek Diggs on the line, the Fort Myers police chief. Chief, do you have a sense for how many people stayed at home when you asked them to leave?
Some shelter in place until
where it was eventually going to hit. We saw families sometimes waiting for hours to get in. Right now in Naples, there is a state of civil emergency. That means you are being told to stay in place, do not go out. So first responders also will not be coming out as the conditions here get worse. You know, we've been talking to officials from Collier County all day, and they're saying people are going to have to be patient and people are going to have to be self-reliant. You know, it's coming this way at 8 to 14 miles an hour, and it's going to be a double hit. It's going to be wind of maybe 130 miles an hour, and we've had the owner of some of these buildings come around, and he thinks a lot of these trees are going to be gone by tomorrow. And then after that, you know, we're between the Gordon River and the Gulf, so we could see 10 to 15 feet of storm surge. So some of these roads could be rivers. We could see a very different topography by tomorrow morning, Shepard.
A very low
in Miami right now, standing
few places
in the middle
in Collier County
of Hurricane Irma, which has been striking Florida now for what feels like days. It's really been since last night when we felt the force of this storm starting to come onshore. The Eyewall passed over the Florida Keys at about 9 o'clock this morning, and it's just been pounding the entire southern part of the peninsula now for hours. And our Chad Myers says we can expect these tropical storm force winds here, really hurricane force winds here in Miami for several more hours, and the impact is being felt in very, very specific and dangerous ways now. Number one, there was a crane collapse in downtown Miami on Biscayne Boulevard, 300. A crane collapsed. The boom fell down there. There have been pictures of that. We do not know how safe that area is. Authorities have warned people not to go anywhere near it. And then there is the storm surge. Brickell Avenue. A lot of people know Brickell Avenue right now covered in water. They had predicted 3 to 6 feet of storm surge. Our Chad Myers says the number is at 5.5. That 5.5 has been enough to flood part of the downtown area right now. That part of the downtown area, we should note, was part of the mandatory evacuation zone. So this is exactly what they feared might happen, exactly what they predicted might happen. All right, right now what I want to do is I want to go down to the Florida Keys. Our Bill Weir has been in the Keys for days right now. Bill, we have not heard from you in a couple hours. I was concerned. I just asked our producer to check on you. Give me a sense of what's happening in Key Largo, Bill.
I appreciate the concern, Johnny, but yeah, we just came down to find a safer spot. We were getting a little worried about where we were. We were getting awfully wet where we were. Decided to try to leave the high-speed car wash because we found a little better bunker in the center of this condominium community here on the west side of Key Largo. This is the top of the Keys, the upper Keys. What we're really worried about, and meanwhile, I mean, the winds here are sustained 60, 70 miles an hour. We're seeing 80 and 90 mile an hour gusts, trees down everywhere. It's no wonder the power went out so quickly last night. What we're really worried about are the lower Keys. People go down there because it is low key. We're having audio issues. Back to down.
All right, Bill Weir in Key Largo. I confess, Bill, I was having a hard time making out exactly what you're saying, but I take it as good news that you're saying anything at all right now. I'm pleased to hear your voice down in Key Largo where you've been riding out this storm. The Eyewall did pass the Florida Keys, about 70 miles from where Bill is right now. Key Largo, one of the northernmost Keys. The Eyewall passed much further south than that. Our thanks to Bill for being there for us. Now to Rosa Flores, who is in downtown Miami, seeing this storm surge firsthand. Rosa, what are you seeing?
John, both the storm surge and ponding is what we're seeing here in Brickell, which is the financial district. Just to give you a lay of the land, I'm right next to the Publix grocery store for those people who are familiar. The street now completely ponded, and as you mentioned, we're seeing a double punch. First of all, the ocean coming onto land. I'm probably about 3 to 4 streets from the ocean. The ocean is to my left. We're seeing that come onto land, and then of course the ponding on these streets, because a lot of the debris that's been flying around is now blocking those drains. Now I'm going to pan the camera over here so you can see what it looks like closer to the ocean. This is in the direction of the ocean. We're seeing a lot of that water come in. Before we moved to this location, there was a building whose first floor was already taking in that water, the surge. That lower floor where usually, it's usually a dock where they park some vehicles, was taking on water. Why? Because the ocean comes onto land in these types of conditions. We're also seeing wind gusts. We're seeing wind tunnels because this is the downtown area, because there are high rises here. Now, we've also seen people who did not evacuate, even though people were told to evacuate in this area. Some of them walking around, others driving around. One of them speeding down the water that was right next to our live position. Not recommended according to first responders. Now, John, there is a drainage system that is designed to drain water out here at this hour, being tested both by surge and ponding water. John?
That's right, not to mention all the debris that is clogging those drains right now. Rosie, you gave great advice. Don't try to drive through the flooded streets. It is the worst thing you can do. You simply cannot tell how deep the water is. Again, if you haven't evacuated, if you've chosen to stay at home, stay inside. especially in the Miami area right now. Ride out this storm, and if you have evacuated, don't try to get home. Not yet. Still too dangerous. The first responders won't even go out right now because the winds are too strong at this point. Hurricane Irma battering southern Florida right now. Miami getting the worst of it as we stand here, but the storm moving up the west coast very soon. Naples next in the target. Stay with CNN's special live coverage of Hurricane Irma. We'll be right back.
Above 10 feet above sea level. And if that is the case and the storm surge is right, at one point or another, everything could be flooded.
That's right. We're on the third floor, and the owner said the first floor might be gone by tomorrow. So if you're in a one-story house, you could be in trouble here as this water could continue to rise. And keep in mind when that storm surge could happen. And, of course, all these things are coulds. We're hearing so much extreme statements on the air. It could come after the eye hits. That's when the worst of the storm surge could hit. If the eye hits around here in the afternoon, we could see people in darkness with that storm surge. And it could be a very sort of silent, rapid thing in the dark. Water rising in the dark is not easy to detect. So that could be the real danger here over the next 24 hours.
Again, be safe in Naples. Thanks very much. We'll check in throughout the day. Some signs blown over in South Miami-Dade County, and some live pictures from WSVN there. Let's listen.
This way, you see it rushing against the street. I mean, it's just absolutely insane. And I don't know if you can hear it or not, but if you listen to it, this sounds like a train with square wheels riding down US 1. I mean, and these are the images that people think of with Hurricane Andrew. But imagine this, but 2 to 3 times worse, because that's what they experienced 25 years ago when Hurricane Andrew came to this area. And a lot of people talked about Hurricane Andrew when they were talking about getting ready for Irma. So certainly, hopefully, people are breathing somewhat of a sigh of relief.
It's measuring around 60 miles per hour. They're so fast that the sheriff's office is saying all emergency vehicles are now cleared from the roads. They will not be returning to the streets until that wind dies down, until the storm has been cleared. Concern.
I am in touch with several of our neighbors who keep checking in. We do have one neighbor that has the type of generator that kicks in immediately after losing the power. And they have indicated, feel free to come by if it gets to be too much for you once the power has gone out.
Okay. Yvonne Pandolfo, thank you so much for letting our viewers in on what you're experiencing there. We wish you the best of luck.
Winds of 40 miles an hour to move into southwest Florida already. They're having gusts at that height. But the forward progress of the storm at 8 or 9 miles an hour, this will be a very slow mover. They're expecting some acceleration.
You can see, yes, there's a few signs down, pom-poms in the road, and just like little things. The roadway into the hotel proper, there's some trees that are down there. We're not going to worry about shooting that for you right now. Trust me, it's there. And anyway, this is what we're seeing a lot of right now. The question is, how long will these winds sustain? Will we get up this way in the Fort Lauderdale area? Will we get strong feeder bands? And what happens is that the rain continues, the wind continues, kind of weakens branches and so on. Then you get a big gust, and then that's when you get some real problems. But these guys here, will be driving these trucks. They'll be ready to go out as soon as they get the word. Also, we did see fire rescue on the road. We did see some police on the road. So they are obviously these winds are not high enough to prevent them from going out and making emergency calls, serious emergency calls as this storm develops. So that's the very latest from Broward County, Fort Lauderdale area. I'm Hank Tester, CBS 4. Back to you guys.
We believe you, Hank, when you say that there's damage in other places. We certainly know that is out there. And this, a true testament to the severity of some of the damage we're seeing throughout South Florida right now.
Yeah, this is one of those images that everybody seems to be sharing today on social media. And it really is something to take a look at here, because this was one of the topics of concern in the hours leading up to the first impacts of Irma. What you're looking at here is a crane that appears to have snapped and part of it collapsed onto a building that is under construction. And I have a very reliable source that works in in the real estate industry that says this is the Vice apartment complex. It's a luxury building, a rental building that was going up on 3rd and Biscayne. And as you see there, that crane came down on it. And it's of concern, not to the construction site, because obviously nobody's there, but to the buildings around that area. Of course, it's a heavily populated area of downtown Miami. And even though people were asked to evacuate from those buildings, some decided to stay. So the concern now is, could debris from this continue to fly around as we continue to see the strongest winds, which, as we've heard, will last for about another hour and a half. The strongest winds, we're going to see winds throughout the day. And I know that the city of Miami was working now with the developers.
It has picked up remarkably in the last hour. We're getting gusts here reported 70 miles an hour and in excess. And we're in what they call, when you chase storms, the snap, crackle, and pop phase here in Naples. You're starting to hear sounds of things fail. Branches, trees, transformers. And you start looking around to figure out where they're coming from, so you know where the danger is. A lot of trees are down here. There's a lot of debris, but we're worried about a higher level of damage. So let's get to Chad Myers right now. Chad, the simple question is, what happened? We were expecting this some hours from now, and all of a sudden, it's pretty close to what we're seeing in Miami in the main. I mean, it has gotten much worse here, much snottier in very quick time.
And expected to almost double from there. I mean, that's what this major hurricane means to you, Chris. You just had a wind gust to 71. Wind gust there may be 120. Now, the force of 120 is more than double the force of 70. I know the numbers aren't double, but it's a force that is multiplied by itself. It is wind speed squared. And so you really have to expect what's going on there. The water near Chris now 4.5 feet below where it should be, and it's going to come rushing back as soon as that eye gets by. There goes the eye right through Sarasota and Tampa, and then maybe even up towards St. Mark's. That I was there for the flood for Ivan. Here comes the storm, though, coming on shore right now near Everglades City. Again, a second landfall. The first one was Cudjoe Key in the lower Keys, just to the east of Key West. There is the spin of the storm right now, pushing the water away from Naples, pushing the water away from Tampa, but that will end as soon as the eye goes by. Now, Tampa, you still have about 8 hours or so before that eye goes by. But this is now the high-res forecast radar. Significant rain and stormy weather, winds to 90. Just had a 91 mile per hour gust in Miami Airport. And so that's still going to happen for the next few hours. Move you ahead 3 hours. The storm spins and Naples is in the eye. So Chris Cuomo will see wind at 120 going from east to west. We'll wait a while. It'll go to 0. And then it'll come from the other direction at about 100 miles per hour. So what's blowing one way will then get knocked around and get picked up and blown the other way as debris. And that's going to be Sarasota, for Venice, for Tampa. Same story. You all get inside the eye. So the wind goes, does its damage. The wind stops and then comes back around. Even though there's not much wind here, there's still going to be damaging wind speeds, at least 90 miles per hour on the backside of that. Chris, you have a question.
Yeah, the storm surge, Chad, thank you for explaining that exchange of energy and that phenomenon of pulling the water out. Yes. But do me a favor, try to quantify what that return will look like in terms of how far it could go from where it usually is inshore. Are we talking 100 feet in, a couple of blocks in? You know, like how far in will people have to look at standing water, and how long can it be around?
It's all about the topography of where you live. If you're on a very sharp angle to the water, it may only come back 1 or 2 blocks, but there's no real mountains there. There's nothing elevated there. It is going to spread inland for city blocks and maybe miles before it finally stops. As the storm goes by, the winds change direction, and this is what the Weather Service, the National Hurricane Center, has been so concerned about. In fact, they gave us a personal phone call and said, we want you to stress this. This is it. Yes, things will get knocked down with the wind, but the surge will kill people. And they wanted everyone to know that. This is the real deal. 10 to 15 feet on top of what should be mean sea level, which means for Chris, that could be 19 feet higher than it is now because it's already 4 feet down because the wind's blowing the wrong way. Anderson, this is a major event for Marco, for Sanibel, for Punta Gorda, where we were years ago, all the way through Naples, Fort Myers, and the like. Big time water hitting places that have never been wet before.
You know, and Chad, I keep thinking about that there's the storm surge, which is the rise of the water, but then depending on the force of the winds, there can be waves on top of that, correct?
Absolutely. The waves will come in from the ocean off the Gulf of Mexico at about 90 miles per hour. Now, we know that the wind at Naples may be 128, but that will be from the east. The backside of the eye never recovered from hitting Cuba. And I guess we're going to, thank some stars for America, but we're going to have to help Cuba because they got hit by a 160 mile per hour Cat 5 that took the stuffing out of this storm. That's why we're not talking 160, we're talking 125. Big difference in power, big difference in damage. The northern part of the Cuban Keys were really destroyed from this storm, taking the energy from Irma, putting it onto Cuba proper, and taking that energy damage away from America. It finally moves on up to Albany and Macon and the like, and we will have hurricane wind gusts even here in Atlanta. I know that seems ridiculous because everybody left and went to Atlanta or Charlotte or Williamsburg, someplace like that up to the north, and the winds will be strong here and also in Birmingham. Anderson.
All right, Chad, appreciate that. It's really nice to get that level of detail because that is what people all throughout this region are looking for now, trying to absorb every detail, every data point they can to help them make decisions. I want to go to Miguel Marquez, who is in Punta Gorda. He was there yesterday as well for us. Obviously, Punta Gorda, it's so interesting to be in Tampa and talk about Punta Gorda because, Miguel, back in 2004 when Hurricane Charlie was coming up, it was supposed to hit Tampa. Then it changed about, I think it was about 4 degrees, ended up turning and hitting Punta Gorda and really decimating that town. What are the concerns there now, and just what is the environment like right now there?
Yeah, well, what we are seeing right now, you will be seeing very shortly. The winds here are about 40 miles per hour. They are sustained. They are gusting up into the 50s. We're seeing some of the worst weather we've seen so far. It is shelter in place for Charlotte County. And they were just talking about sort of the wind effect on the bays and on the water here. I want to show you this. 2 boats, you think they're floating? They're not. Move in there. You can see these are actually in mud now. This is the Peace River and the bay right next to Punta Gorda. If you come over to the right here, you can see how much of the bay is actually exposed. And all of that is just low-lying water on mud, essentially. And that is blowing across the mud, and all that water is going out. So what goes out must come back in eventually, and they are expecting things a little bit better here. They're expecting the winds to top out at about 110 miles an hour in Punta Gorda, with gusts up to 135, so a little better than we were yesterday. They're also expecting the storm surge to be a little bit lower, 5 to 8 feet, but they're saying there could be 3 feet of water, that's about up to here, 3 feet of water across certain parts of Charlotte County. This is the bay, and you get a very good sense of just how powerful this storm is and where it's blowing. Look how much of the floor of the river, of the Peace River here, has been exposed by the wind blowing this storm out. Once that Eyewall passes here and it starts blowing up the other way, then they'll have that storm surge here and things will get even worse. But right now, very sustained winds here, and it's only going to get worse. We're about 40 miles an hour at the moment. It will get up to 90 to 110 miles an hour, gusting up to 135 in this area. So we are now battening down and hunkering down for the duration. Anderson?
Miguel, we're going to check in with you. Be careful out there. And again, for people a little bit north of where Miguel is in Punta Gorda and where Chris Cuomo is here in Tampa and elsewhere, a lot of that storm surge may be coming in the darkness late at night, which makes it all the more scary. You don't get a sense of what's coming. It's very hard to see what's coming, and especially with those hurricane force winds whipping at that time of night. We're going to take a short break, and our special coverage of Hurricane Irma continues in a moment.
My name is Mike Rogers.
looks like that one car couldn't make it happen anymore, and the van is there to help. But this sort of thing going on in lots of places. And the vice president mentioned Marco Island and Naples and how this storm appears to be headed in that direction. We'll ask Steve Harrigan about that. It sure looks like it.
Which is in Fort Myers.
Shepard, it is coming right down this road here in Naples. The rain coming down in sheets and the wind sometimes kicking up into definitely hurricane force winds. The timing of this is going to be critical. We could see the worst of the wind in about 2.5 hours time. And keep in mind, high tide here is at 3:55 p.m. So we could have the worst of the wind and the highest of the tide just at the wrong time. They've been aggressively trying to get people out of this city of 20,000. They've done an excellent job with that. The sheriffs have been going door to door. But right now, a civil emergency is in place. People are being told to shelter in their homes, and that's exactly what people are doing here. There's no one out except for some journalists to watch this. As far as structural damage from 150-mile-an-hour winds, we have not seen that yet. So I think
hopefully those don't turn into projectiles at some point. Hopefully those are heavy enough, but who knows at this point. The pool area, we checked that out earlier. The pool seems to be okay as far as the water level. But we saw a door that's swinging open with supplies in it. Unfortunately, we couldn't open the gate to get to it to shut it for them. We might have to try to do that later. All right, so this is the front of the neighborhood. We're gonna walk through these gates here. See, some people are still taking advantage of this so-called nice weather that we have. People are taking walks. Not recommended, even though I'm doing it. And a speed bump's gonna trip me, so hold on one second. You can see just past this person here, that tree snapped already. It's already gone. And over here you can see some palm fronds down. We're gonna walk through these gates here. So here we are, we're just off of Old Metro Parkway. You can see palm fronds have already taken a beating. We would be lucky if we only saw palm frond damage. You can see a bunch of them right there. All across the entrance to this neighborhood is Forest Lake Townhomes. You can see the palm trees are just taking a beating right now. And I want to be able to show you guys the street, this intersection over here. The lights are still working, but it's only a matter of time until those likely go out. Let's see if I can get my photographer to zoom in on the street signs. You can see those are just swaying right now. And it's really powerful. And then this camera that's closest to us, it's already bent. The other ones haven't bent from what I can tell, but this one is pretty badly bent already. And here's another bad van, so I'm gonna hold on to my hat because I've already lost it a couple times today. Wow, that one hurt. Yeah, this is one of those dangerous vans. We're probably gonna need to seek shelter. Caleb, look at this sign right here. The construction sign is just wobbling. Of course, it stops once I mention it. You see those trees over here? I'm really interested. Trees over here. I'm really interested to see what those trees do during Hurricane Irma to see the aftermath here, but it's getting pretty hairy out here for us, so we're going to send it back to you guys so we can get into some shelter.
Good idea. Okay, thank you very much, Kim. And you know, she showed those traffic signals and those poles. A lot of them have all been replaced to withstand very strong winds from hurricanes, so they may fare better this time around than some of the previous, as well as some of the power poles. We've seen FPL and other major utilities replace a lot of the power poles. Those old wooden ones would break, snap. They've got those big concrete poles that are meant
Charlie and Wilma, because they had to replace them, and a lot of them are concrete now.
That's right. So they may fare a little bit better than some of the other things in our area.
That will help. We have on the phone, I believe, Ada, who is downtown in Fort Myers, riding this out in one of the high rises.
Her husband.
Oh, Warren.
Oh, Warren. Okay. Thank you for joining us.
Trying to reach,
How are you guys
We're
doing?
losing
first
some
of all?
trees, but others are being pushed to their break point. Different parts of structures are being tested and weakened. So what will happen when this storm surge that Chad's talking about, when that comes back? And when these much more powerful winds, you heard him say, Anderson, he believes that the effective force of the winds that we're going to get in a few hours will be twice what we're getting now. That's the big concern.
Yeah, I want to go to Miami, where Peter Zaleweski, who's a business owner, is there. Peter, I'm wondering, how are things for you in terms of what you and what have you been seeing in your area in Miami?
Well, Anderson, what I can tell you is right now in the streets, and I'm in downtown Miami. I'm probably about a good 1,000 feet, maybe 2,000 feet directly from Biscayne Bay. Biscayne Bay is about ready to breach some of the seawalls that are in and around here. On the actual street level, it's probably about 2 foot deep or so. It's well past the grill of a regular traditional automobile. And in terms of winds, it's probably 70 to 80s plus, and then you're getting bursts. You can see it in the windows when the windows start to get pushed in. And a lot of the trees are bending, and they have been bending for quite some time.
The location you're in, is it a new construction? Because, it's one of the things we've been talking about is in the wake of Andrew, building codes were really upgraded, particularly for any new construction in South Florida.
It is a brand new building. It was constructed in 2013, came online. The developer had the foresight to go forward and actually build it so it's almost as if you're starting on the second floor. So the first floor is where the parking garage is and where you enter the building, for the most part for visitors, is going to be on that second floor. So think of what you'll see in the Keys, or think about what you'll see in certain parts which flood a lot. Effectively, that ground floor is basically just dedicated towards parking. And, and when the water recedes, then you can sort of clean up and go back to normal. So they did take those advantages or those steps, and they also they put in place some pretty strong stringent glass panes, and so far they seem to be holding up, but I'm not sure if it'll continue, but I have some confidence, and I'm here.
And in terms of supplies, I mean, people have been told to have about 3 days worth. I assume you have stocked up.
Well, unfortunately enough, I went vegetarian, so I have a lot of beans and rice laying around. So I tended to cook up some of that, throw some spice in there, and I'm not worried. The only thing I'm worried about is probably gaining weight.
Well, if that's your only concern, then you're in very good shape. Obviously, here in Tampa, which has not seen this level of storm in nearly 100 years, 1921 was a storm which really decimated this area. And obviously, back then the city was not anywhere close to the development that we have seen now. But there's real concern about the buildings, their ability to deal with the level of flooding that may occur here. Peter, I appreciate talking to you in Miami. Certainly wish you the best in the days ahead. Our coverage continues from points all across southern Florida, from the west coast to the east coast. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back.
All right, thank you. We'll check back. We want to have a great perspective, first of all, and to know that they're safe going through this. Let's go to Marco Island now. I think we have some new video here. Folks on the island starting to see tree branches coming down on the road. And again, Marco Island, this situation could change very, very much in the next couple to 3 hours.
Yeah.
We'll be watching that closely.
Absolutely. They're seeing hurricane wind gusts and very, very strong winds there. Of course, the island was under an evacuation order for quite a few days already. Most people have left, but this gives you some idea of what people, if you're out of the area, you're trying to get some news about your neighborhood. We are seeing some big trees broken off in this picture. So that is expected in this type of hurricane with the winds that we're seeing, that will have a lot of tree damage and maybe some power lines down. But if you look at the house is faring just fine in this picture. Of course, it's a limited view, but we just want to give people on Marco some idea of what's happening there. Let's go now to Fort Myers Beach, and this is video near the Diamond Head Beach Resort. And you can see the palm trees are always
you can see in neighborhood by neighborhood here. Looks like a lot of people shuttered up there. The winds are starting, but as she was saying, a lot of folks, and there are a lot of neighborhoods like this, there's not always a place a garage to bring a car inside, or to bring the trash inside. Hopefully, if you have a next door neighbor with a garage, get those things in, because those things absolutely will fly in a hurricane, those garage garbage canisters and those recycling canisters.
Yeah. Let's go to some video from our crew that's driving around Naples, and they were doing this earlier today, and they went to several areas just to see how things were progressing. This is before the current weather we're seeing in Naples right now, so it is not as severe as is going on right now, but you can see there's a lot of wind, some very, very heavy rain. When they stopped the car and got out, there was some very, very saturated ground already because of all of those heavy, heavy rain bands. Jim Farrell told us most of the rain is to the north of this storm. So we're seeing so much rain right now, so much of that heavy, heavy rain and downpours. But the roads you see, nobody's on the roads. That's a great thing to see. Roads very clear at this hour, but the windshield wipers are going as they're driving around. And you see some of the landscape damage, palm fronds in the middle of the road there. This is probably now down near the Gulf Shore area, if I remember her saying. And some of the trees and palm trees on that saturated ground have been knocked over. But so far in this part of Naples, earlier today, this is at least an hour or two ago, there was not heavy damage caused by the early bands of Hurricane Irma.
Yeah, but the winds are picking up. Let's go to Kelsey Kushner live on Fort Myers Beach for us now. Kelsey, how are you doing?
Hey guys, yeah, I snuck outside just for a couple minutes because I wanted to show you guys just a little update of how it's doing out here. You can see some of the trees are blowing a lot more in the wind than they were this morning. Now, when I first got out here at 2 a.m., it was just starting to see some of the wind, a little bit of rain, but now such a difference. I mean, you step outside for 2 seconds and this wind hits you, and it hits you hard. Now, there is a pool down here. I don't know if we're able to see it through this screen, but some of the water in the pool is splashing up. It's already going over the edge of the pool. There's some branches in there. We're not seeing a lot of damage, but we do see a lot of palm tree leaves. They're down. There's some pots that are knocked over. Nothing too bad, but definitely kicking up out here. Now, I just want to say that we are staying at the hotel. We feel safe right now. We did just have a team meeting with the general manager. He told us that he wants us to pack a bag, and around 4 o'clock when the hurricane's supposed to hit us the hardest, we are supposed to evacuate into either a staircase, into a ballroom, and kind of hang out for the entire duration of the hurricane. Now, for me, this is my first hurricane, so I'm a little freaked out, but he is making us feel incredibly safe. I feel really safe being inside this concrete building so far. I mean, they have all of the windows boarded up through the hallway, so it's a little chilling hearing the wind pounding. You hear it howling. You can't walk anywhere. You kind of feel a little slip, you slide a little on the ground because a lot of people are coming in with their wet shoes. So it's dark, but I know that we are safe outside here. So again, we just have some trees blowing. Winds are definitely kicking up. The beach has some sand kicking up on it as well. So we will be safely monitoring the conditions out here. We'll keep you guys updated with how the beach is doing. Back to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Kelsey. And follow those directions because they prepare those buildings just so they have a safe place for people to go and ride out the worst of the storm.
Go inside and be safe. All right, let's take you live to some different cameras around the area. This is from the Hyatt Coconut Point. This is Estero looking off from Bonita Springs, looking off toward the Gulf right now. And you can see we have noticed the conditions really starting to deteriorate in these areas here in the last few minutes. So we'll show you some of these live pictures.
And let's go now to Sanibel, to the Sanibel Causeway. And you're going to see, as Jim pointed out earlier, there's no water in Punta Gorda, where the boat ramp is. The water has been pulled out. The rain is coming down very, very heavy right now at the Sanibel Causeway, and visibility is just terrible. Deteriorating conditions there at the Sanibel Causeway.
Yeah, you can tell the difference if you were watching a few minutes ago about how much worse it is there. Let's go live back downtown to Fort Myers, and this is right outside of our back door here, Billy Creek, and look how low the creek is. The water is still going out toward the river. Now, interesting that we just talk, because we don't have a perspective on the full river from where we are right here. But the gentleman we were just talking to staying in High Point Place was saying the river itself doesn't look like it's drawn down, at least in downtown Fort Myers, but the creek certainly has. You can see how high the dock level there where that boat should be.
Well, the river where that gentleman was calling from is about a mile wide, so it's quite a big wide area there, so maybe he can't see it from as high up as he was. But Billy Creek this is just a short distance to the river, so you can see what is happening there, and we will try to bring you this picture. Hopefully it will be clear enough for us later so that you can can see the difference when we're talking about the storm surge much later today. Now, we also have some wind coming to us. Is this Cape Coral? Yes, Cape Coral, and you can see just the fresh water flooding from the rain right now. Just so much rain in that area. And remember, Cape Coral had a lot of flooded areas just a week ago, or a little over a week ago, right? And so the ground is already saturated, and these heavy rain bands are just dropping so much moisture and precipitation into Cape Coral right now that you can just see the ditches are full, the swales are full, the parking lots are filling up. There's a lot of water in Southwest Florida right now.
Yeah, we've got a lot more coming too. Let's go to Punta Gorda and Charlotte Harbor right here. This is at the end of Scott Street. So this is Charlotte Harbor right at the Peace River. And wow, look at that. You can kind of see those
are navigation markers, so you wouldn't see them.
You can see it right down to the sand.
Yeah, yeah.
You hardly ever see that. And
you're not navigating that today.
And the water is on its way out right now, but it certainly is going to be replaced and then some later on. Wow, look at that.
Yeah, that gives you some perspective on how low the water is right now ahead of Hurricane Irma, and it'll be interesting to see how deep it is after.
Hopefully that's something we only see today and never again, but yeah. Wow. Okay, this picture. This is where it made landfall. This is the first picture we have from Cujo Key. First landfall. That house is on a 12-foot stilt, and that's the water right up to the front door. So that gives you an idea of the storm surge that came in as Irma made landfall at 10 after 9 this morning in the Keys, not too far from Key West at Cujo Key.
Okay, we are going to go on to the phone now with Jennifer Mills, who is in Naples. Jennifer, thanks so much for being with us. How are you today?
I'm doing well, considering. Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. How are you guys?
We're fine, thank you. Where are you exactly in Naples? Where are you riding things out?
We are on Airport Pulling Road, right between the streets of Immokalee and Vanderbilt Beach, right next to Pelican Marsh Elementary in that neighborhood.
Yes, so you're in North Naples.
I am. I live in Bonita Shores, but we were evacuated, and so we are riding this out at my mom's house.
Okay, and I understand no power?
No power. No, we lost. We were surprised. We had power until about 11 o'clock, 11:30. Then we lost power.
Okay. Well, you've had some really strong wind gusts there, some hurricane-forced winds. So it's not a big surprise. And you sent us this picture as well. Why don't you describe this so people know exactly what this is?
Okay, because you have to understand, I've been listening to Jim for the last 48 hours, and I've been doing everything he says to do. We cut the screens out of my cage. I mean, I've been freezing bags of water, and then there was something very calming about him, so it became a joke with my husband and I, because once I lost power, I'm like, okay, I'm going to cut his picture out now, and then I'll feel a little better.
You know, hey, he makes us all feel better, Jennifer. So Jim is standing here with us right now, and so, Jim, how are you feeling about that? They feel good. You're making them feel calm?
I hate that picture. Well, whatever.
No. But she said they did everything you said. And
who was that? I was busy.
That's Jennifer Mills. She's talking to us from North Naples.
Oh, hey, Jennifer, thank you. I don't know what you said, but I still have a job, so it must have been okay.
It was all good things. It was all good things.
A new info in. I've got the 2 o'clock advisory. The strongest wind gust, by the way, so far has still been at Naples, 103 mile per hour gust. And we can fire up our weather computer. Well, actually, all right, let's see. I've got a picture here. I'll let this go. I'll just have a little time lapse. Let that play out and watch the water. It doesn't seem to be going up or down. It's hanging in there. So obviously at below average levels, right around the corner from our studio on Palm Beach Boulevard, that's Billy's Creek, which leads out to the Caloosahatchee. This is new. 2 o'clock info is in. And hey, it's better. It's weaker. It's not a Category 4 anymore. It's Category 3 hurricane. The wind has dropped from 130 to 120. Still a major hurricane. And the air pressure's come up a bit. So it appears to be weakening. Now, we measured forward motion at about 12 miles per hour when Scott was measuring it on Doppler radar. And now the Hurricane Center says, yes, it is moving at 12 miles per hour to the north. So we're expecting a major Category 3 hurricane to come in Collier County coast, Lee County coast, western Charlotte County this afternoon And this evening, here's an approximate position for 8 p.m. Take the icon out that shows you the forecast category, and you can see the forecast track right in here. Now, if this comes true, the eye of Irma may be just offshore Marco, but it might go right over the Sanibel Causeway and then into Charlotte Harbor. And remember that donut of windy weather surrounding the eye is going to go right along this track. So if you are within a stone's throw of that red line, you may have the eye come through and some very powerful wind in the Eyewall. These are right now wind speeds occurring in southwest Florida. Steady, sustained, 49 miles per hour. Naples, Fort Myers up to 40 miles per hour. And these numbers will be increasing during the day. Let's take a look at the wind gusts. Naples did report a wind gust of over 100. Now, the most recent report, 71. 61 mile an hour gust in Fort Myers. The Cape, almost 50. And Port Charlotte, 48 degrees. Here's the center of circulation. Look at how much rain there is for the state. All the way up to Jacksonville, Daytona Beach, over to Gainesville on the west side. Southward through all of southwest Florida. Now, the Eyewall, right in here. This is the northern semicircle. Here's Marco Island, 951. Marco Island, single digits. The northern extension of the Eyewall is now 8 miles to the south of Marco. The eye's farther south, but this is where the roughest weather is going to be. It's coming within the hour. In the next 60 minutes or less, this northern Eyewall will be moving over Everglades City, Chokoloskee, Fort Myers, Marco, Goodland, and then it's headed for Naples. Take a look. Here's the time lapse. So we've got steady movement here to the north at about 12 miles per hour, preceded by big bands of rain. These feeder bands, extensive, heavy rain. We're still expecting a foot of rain or more in parts of the region before the end of this soaking, windy, surging event. Here's the surface wind. There you have it, coming into Marco Island. And we still think there's a good chance it will be over the island or nearby the island between 4 and 5 p.m. Then the wind picks up out of the south and the storm surge event begins. The wind event is occurring now. The storm surge event gets going as the hurricane begins to move through the area. And here we go. If the eye is nearby Sanibel later this evening, the wind will be onshore from the Monroe and Collier County coast, and it'll be turning onshore over parts of the Lee County coast. So this is how it's going to play out today. Hurricane force wind sustained in neighborhoods near the path of the hurricane. I showed you that red line. Wind gusts near or above 100 miles per hour again in communities near the path of that line. There will be some very powerful gusts inland to Lake Okeechobee as well. And then we have to keep our fingers crossed that this storm surge event doesn't play out quite as bad as it could. But surge is definitely on the way. You cannot escape storm surge when a hurricane comes in out of the south and moves in this path. There's no miracle cure to that. The wind is going to come off of the Gulf of Mexico and it's going to push the Gulf right into the coast. That will raise the level of the water along the coastline, starting 10,000 Islands, Marco, Naples, Lee, Charlotte Harbor, the rest of Charlotte County, and then Sarasota County. So we are going to try to stay on the air as long as we can. I do want to mention that I know a high percentage of our viewers, and maybe this includes you if you're still watching, if you haven't lost power, receive our signal via satellite, whether it's Dish TV, I have that at home, I've had DirecTV. DirecTV, rain can block that signal. If you retain power, you still have power, but you can lose our signal because of rain fade is what we call it. As too much of a last-minute suggestion, perhaps. But if you have rabbit ears stored away anywhere in the house, you can hook those up to your television. You'll have to find the remote control, change the input from your HDMI 1, 2, or however you're getting your satellite signal to the antenna selection. And then you will be able to receive a very clear picture of what we are showing you on Wink News. Generally, it's going to be channel 11.1 or 2, one of those. Flip around. If you don't have rabbit ears, now here's just like a MacGyver suggestion. Remember that show? The guy could fix anything? If you have a coat hanger, problem is you have a coax connector on the back of your TV. And obviously a coat hanger is not going to screw into that. But if you can get the coat hanger and stretch it out, untwist it so it's a rod, and if you can get that kind of masking taped or taped to the outer threaded part of that coax, you might get a signal from the air into your input of the television, and then again go to the TV or the remote control, change the input to the antenna selection, and you will find that we are on the air if you lose our signal via satellite. Keep that in mind in case that happens. All right, let's take a look. All right, that was later in the day, 10 o'clock. Charlotte Harbor, now the wind's coming on shore for you. And then once the hurricane leaves, we are going to have an extended period of onshore wind. So it won't be, the water won't be as high tomorrow, I don't think, as it will be at the peak of the storm surge event later today, but the water's going to be held at the coast. The storm surge comes in, it builds up, goes up the river, the harbor, Gordon River, and then the water wants to go back out. Gravity rules. Gravity wants that water to leave where it's not supposed to be. But if the wind is strong enough, and it will be very strong tomorrow, that's going to keep the water at the coast. It's going to slow down the ability for that water to drain back into the Gulf of Mexico. So I do expect that tomorrow is going to be another significant day for flooding along the coast. So we will have to monitor that as we get there. You may never see this again. Take a look from our Punta Gorda sky cam. It's not wet. There's water there, but boy, where did the water go? It's been blown out to the Gulf of Mexico by these strong northeasterly winds. And as that wind continues to blow out of the northeast, literally it's moving water. It is pushing water away from the coast. And I kind of coined the idea of this. I call this now the Donna effect. This happened with Hurricane Donna in 1960. That's Billy Creek, right here behind Wink Television. And it is exposed. You can see some of the muck there along the seawall. That's not supposed to be that low, but it is. We've got the Collier County Emergency Operations Center online. Is this Dan? Dan Summers? Oh, a video of a live look video. This is a recent shot. We took these. Oh, this is live. All right. From the Collier County Emergency Operations Center. This is live. You are looking at the pine trees. Yeah, good. Good perspective. Back up a bit. Look how tall they are. They are, I would imagine, they've already survived wind gusts of 100 miles per hour. So, you know, if I was a tree doctor, I'd say, hey, so far so good. Maybe you will survive, pine tree. They've already made it through gusts of 100, probably because they're almost palm tree-like, so thin that the air is able to flow through those. Now, palm trees, as I'm sure you know, are very wind resistant. You know, Donna came through in 1960. If you're familiar with Fort Myers and the palm trees, the royal palms along McGregor Boulevard, they're still standing. They went through Donna. Wind blows through a palm tree very easily. The trunk is not the problem on a tree. It's like a telephone pole. The wind will blow around the trunk. It's the leaves, or in this case, palm fronds, that trap the wind, and then that resistance bends the tree to a potential breaking point. And of course, if it's in a stand of other trees, then the wind gets blocked by the trees nearby, and the wind's not quite as strong. So some trees will survive. Others are going to be snapped. There's no doubt about it. And it's not too early to talk to you about post-storm issues. After the hurricane leaves, folks, it is going to, I don't mean to use terminology to make it sound worse than it is, but it is going to look like a war zone in that there's going to be a lot of debris all over the road, front yards, backyards. It's going to be a mess. Twigs, branches, mailboxes, you name it. Everything's going to get rearranged temporarily after these 100-mile-an-hour gusts come through. So as the wind dies down on Monday and the sun comes up, you want to take the look outside, you're going to see quite a scene. I'm sure we're going to get bombarded with pictures from around the area of what it looks like. So that's coming. Don't be surprised when that happens. Ben's on the line. Is he at the Collier County? Oh, a viewer, Pine Island. Hi, Ben. How are you?
Doing fine.
All right. Talk to us. What are you seeing right now, or what are you feeling?
We're right now in Bokeelia on Pine Island, and it's going pretty good. We went out for a drive to check on my grandpa's place in St. James City, and we really saw the water levels drop crazy down off the canals and out off the ends of the piers.
Ben, are you watching the TV? Can you see the pictures that we are showing that you sent to us?
Yes, there
okay,
they are.
Good.
Yep.
Now, I want you to walk us through these pictures. If we can slow down this little slideshow so he has some time to... is that you, Ben?
Yes.
When was that picture taken?
That picture was taken at noon today.
Noontime today. How long have you lived here, Ben?
I've been in Florida for about 3 years now.
Okay. So I'm going to guess the answer to this question is no. You've never seen anything like this.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely.
No, I have not.
Now, I know Bokeelia pretty well. That's just the northern tip of Pine Island. Is this up by the little restaurant up there?
This is actually at the end of St. James City, the very southern end.
You're not Bokeelia. You're St. James City. I'm sorry. All right, talk to us.
I live in...
Go ahead.
Yeah, I live in Bokeelia, but we drove down to St. James City to check on my grandpa's trailer that he has there.
That explains it. You are a resident of Bokeelia, but these are pictures from St. James City. What did it look like? You were there today at noon. This is just a snapshot, but as you looked around, what did it look like? Tell us.
It was pretty crazy. I was surprised to see that some of the trees have already gone over. I sent you a picture of one of those. A lot of debris on the roads, and a lot of trees looking like they're going to be going over on power lines. So
talk to these pictures as we change them, Ben, if you don't mind. Sorry to interrupt, but we've just got a new pickup. This again is St. James City, right?
Yes, this
okay.
is.
And
that is at the bridge of where you cross over, and there's just after you pass York Road, there's a little bridge there, and that's the marinas in that area. A lot of boats sitting dry on the ground.
Wow. What kind of wind were you experiencing there? I know it's hard to guesstimate the exact mile per hour, but was it tough to stand in a spot? Were you getting pushed around, or was it not too bad yet?
A couple times it was. A couple times. I'm guessing around 40 to 50 miles per hour gusts at that time we were getting.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben. Thanks for checking in. And really, thanks for the pictures. Very high quality. There's a tree that you took that picture. That one is down. Now we've got live pictures from Fort Myers Beach with our own Taylor Bazaki at that location. What are we looking at, Taylor? Can you hear me? Can you respond?
Yes, I can hear you. Right now we're enclosed right now in our concrete rooms. We actually just lost power, but what you're looking at right now is outside the windows. As you can see, these are hurricane proof, but look below, look at the towels. The water is already starting to come in, and you're seeing and hearing that wind gust that is just pummeling this glass door right here. Now, if you also take a look back here, we have some backup power, but our rooms are completely out of power. We just lost them. We're feeling those winds and we're seeing everything. And I do want to show you some video that we took earlier that's outside. Obviously, we are inside right now where it's safe. But if you see that video that we shot earlier, we're seeing those palm trees bending, just about looking like they're going to break. We're seeing those stop signs. The wind is really picking up, and since then we have moved inside, but we can show you again. This is getting intense out here. We actually are going to start heading downstairs soon. We're on the 5th floor right now, but right now the hotel staff, there's about 20 of us all here. We're going to start heading down. They're asking us to start packing our bags, getting to a safe spot. Actually, we're going to go down to the ballroom where there's, like I said, going to be about 20 of us. We have a generator down there where it is safe, and we're just packing a bag and hoping to stay safe. We're going to put some of our stuff in the bathroom, and we're just going to start to soon hunker down here and ride out this storm.
Okay, Taylor, that's a great idea. You see the wind swirling outside that door and the rain causing all of that ponding outside the door, because we're not talking about storm surge at Fort Myers Beach at this time.
No, not at all.
We're just talking about those heavy bands of rain and the strong winds blowing it in.
And the Eyewall is arriving now, Marco Island. If you grab the radar picture on our #1 weather computer, you will see time of arrival. I estimated around 2:30. It looks like we're going to be pretty much on target with that. Marco at 9:51. Look at that. Here it comes. The eyewall of a major hurricane is about to make landfall in Florida for the second time. The first time was in the Keys. Here comes landfall #2. I would guess within 15 to 30 minutes, if you are in Marco, Goodland, Everglades City, you are about to experience an eyewall and some of the roughest weather and windiest weather that this Hurricane Irma has to deliver. Please get ready for that.
Now, if you're there, how long will the worst of it be over? Let's say it starts at Marco Island. How long should you expect before the worst of it passes you?
That eyewall semicircle that is about to reach and move over the Collier County coastline from Everglades City to Marco Island, it's about 5-6 miles in diameter. And since the hurricane's moving along about 12 miles, so it's about 30 minutes. You're going to have extreme weather for about 30 minutes. Then if the eye does pass over Marco, it's going to get very calm, an eerie kind of calm. The rain is going to stop, or at worst be very light. And then you're going to have the second half of the hurricane come through. But notice, radar is not showing much on the southern semicircle of the hurricane. There it is. It's less than 8 miles away. I'm going to try to get another Doppler look there. Boy, it's lopsided. Look at the structure of that. You see the calm eye approaching Marco. There's not much on the south of the eye.
Is that does that show it's weakening? Is that a weakening sign, or what does that mean, Jim?
No, it means that basically, well, you've heard us say this many times, they're organized or they're disorganized. It was super organized earlier. It was very concentric. It was very well distributed. Now it's lopsided with rain on the north side. But that doesn't mean all of the wind is on the north side. You can still have wind without rain. So it's going to be a rough ride for Marco here as this eye wall pushes through. There won't be as much rain on the back half, but it could be just as windy on the southern side.
Okay.
All right. We'll get right back to you, Jim. We have Olivia Mancino live at the Emergency Operations Center in Collier County. Olivia.
Well, Chris, just within the past 30 seconds, the winds have really picked up here. As you can see, Jim mentioned earlier, these pine trees just absolutely going nuts in the wind. Now, a lot of us have kind of been cooped up in this building for the last 24 hours, so I'm going to have him swing the camera around. As you can see, plenty of people here are outside right now checking out this storm really before we get the brunt of it. As I mentioned, the winds are really picking up. I mean, check out the parking lot over there. The trees are just going absolutely nuts. We're all kind of bracing for impact here. We know we're going to get the worst of this storm soon. And look at that. One of those trees just fell just this second. It just got uprooted. We know that this storm is really about to hit our area bad. We're going to kind of duck for cover here soon and get under this overhang to make sure everyone is safe. But as you can see, the conditions here in Collier County are starting to get a lot worse. I will send it back to you guys for now.
Olivia.
Yes.
It's Jim.
Yes, I can hear you.
Get inside. Get away now, please. There was a tree that just went down while you were talking. Yep. There could be flying debris at any moment. Thank you.
Everyone's going inside.
Tremendous reporting. But please get out of the weather elements now.
Yes, and when you showed us that radar, you showed us how close it is to Marco. It is not very far from where she is standing at EOC. It's just not a safe time to be out.
No, this is Sanibel live right here. Wow. Do we know where on Sanibel? Oh, this is the causeway.
Okay.
Gosh, it's hard to see even through the.
So this is not our sky cam. This is just a look at the causeway from Sanibel.
One of the
look
biggest
at the visibility
concerns
is
in Miami
just
Beach
terrible right now there, and you can barely see the roadway made out there, and just an incredible picture coming from Sanibel and from some of the barrier island areas to us tonight.
Now back to a point, we were talking about Marco Island and we were looking at that radar image. If we can put the radar image back up again, because something that Jim explained to me while everybody at home couldn't hear, less rain on the bottom side does not mean less wind in the bottom side.
No, you're right. Obviously there will be less rain as that southern semicircle moves over and nearby Marco compared to the northern semicircle, but that doesn't correlate directly with wind. So So you can still have a lot of wind without rain.
All right, we're starting to hear some more power.
So you can still have a lot of wind without rain.
All right, we're starting to hear some more power.
So you can still have a lot of wind without rain.
All right, we're starting to hear some more power.
So you can still have a lot of wind without rain.
All right, we're starting to hear some more power. In Lee County, our reporter Andrea Henderson is at the Lee County Emergency Operations Center with the latest from there.
I'm right outside
outside the Lee County Emergency Operations Center here. Luckily, I'm blocked by a wall here, so I'm being blocked off by the rain. You can see really just how much the wind and the rain is picking up at this time. You can see kind of it gusting along the road there. Now, in Lee County, they have pulled emergency management, EMS, off of the roads. Rescue crews and law enforcement at this time have all been pulled off the roads until it is safe to go back out. They are in specific locations. They will be deployed later once a storm passes and once it is safe. Now, emergency crews here earlier did want to clear up. There were some commotion at the Germain Arena that it was not a safe location there, but they say it is very safe for the people there, and anyone who is seeking shelter there should feel safe. And this is what they had to say earlier at their press conference.
Just like all the other facilities we use to shelter the residents in Lee County, this one has had the due diligence done to ensure that we can pull those people from the evacuation area and give them a safe place to go.
And now that those emergency crews and law enforcement are off the roads, if you do need help, they are still answering phones here. You can call that 211 hotline. Another number that you can call is 239-433-3900, and they will be there answering your calls, assisting you if you need any help at this time. Of course, I'll continue to bring you updates from here at the Lee County Emergency Operations Center. Guys.
All right, thank you. Southwest Florida's most populated city, Cape Coral, is bracing for a weather event bigger than it's ever seen. More than 25,000 people there are under mandatory evacuation.
And Mayor Marnie Zawicki just spoke with reporter Lauren Sweeney. And Lauren, what did she tell you?
Well, I actually spoke to her just before 1 o'clock on Skype, but of course we've been just looking at so many amazing, crazy pictures come in, so we're able to just bring you what she said now. Around 1, they were not seeing hurricane gusts just yet. They were expecting them to arrive around 2, but all the emergency responders at that time were off the road. She said then that she did not want anyone else to be on the road and that they were preparing for a very real storm surge threat at that time.
Everybody at this time is in the emergency personnel that will be working with that are in our EOC, which is our Emergency Operations Center. And we're actually going over and preparing for the aftereffect. And what do you do when the storm surge comes in? You know, how do people get on the list for us to do welfare checks? So we're going over all those preparations now. And this is a really difficult one for me. Because we have for the last 3 days, I think, sent out a ton of messages of people, you know, they need to evacuate, they need to be safe. I've also had to say that once winds hit 40 miles per hour, you know, if they call 911, someone was going to take their call, but nobody's coming at this time. It's just not safe to be out. So I hope that they've had, you know, I just pray that everybody's gotten some safe shelter or their home is, you know, prepared for the hurricane.
All right, John Berman here back in Miami right now. Again, we continue to be in the relentless winds of Hurricane Irma. Gusts over 80 miles an hour, approaching 90 miles an hour in the downtown area and the high rises. They're reporting wind gusts of 100 miles an hour, which is easy to believe. Very easy to believe given what we're in right now, where we're standing. A crane did collapse there in the high winds. There is some storm surge on the streets right now with some of the major boulevards covered with water. Here where we are, it seems the waters are receding just a little bit. We're keeping a very close eye on that. And again, Miami not even going to get the worst of it. The eye moving ever closer to the west coast of Florida, ever closer to population centers like Naples, then Fort Myers, then Tampa. Let's go to Anderson Cooper, who is in Tampa. Anderson, I gotta say, if you're gonna get worse than this, you have a heck of a night in store for you.
Yeah, I think a lot of people here in Tampa and Naples have been watching the images out of Miami with understandably a lot of concern because they know what is heading here is going to be exponentially worse. I'm joined right now by Senator Bill Nelson from the state of Florida. When you see those pictures out of Miami, and we're looking at some right now, it really is a warning to people here about what to expect in the coming hours.
Anderson, people are scared, but people are really helping other people. But Miami is getting those outer rain bands. The real strength of this storm is going to be as it comes up the west coast here. And this river that is now down because it's draining out, the wind is coming from east to west. That's going to reverse.
Yeah, there's the Hillsborough River goes to the Hillsborough Bay and Tampa Bay.
And when the eye of the storm comes up off of the coast and that counterclockwise wind is going to bring that water up Tampa Bay, and up here it doesn't have anywhere to go. You're going to get some flooding here.
Yeah. Storm surge expected anywhere from 5 to 8 feet. But again, with the winds, hurricane force winds, there's going to be waves on top of that water.
And especially if it's at high tide, then we got all the more water.
Yeah. Nobody who has lived in Tampa or nobody alive in Tampa has ever seen a storm like this hit Tampa. 1921 was the last time.
It's never been the big one that would bring the water up here. Now, the only consolation is that it's not going to be a Cat 5, 155 miles an hour plus. But it is going to be significant wind that is going to drive that water up here.
Yeah, I was reading some stuff the mayor had said, I believe it was last year, warning about a Cat 3 storm, about the flooding that would take place, even, in heavy rain, not a torrential, not a hurricane. Tampa, areas in St. Petersburg have problems with flooding.
And that's an example, by the way. They're all prepared. They've done a lot of work. Mayor Buckhorn, Hillsborough County, they're working seamlessly with the federal government, the state government, and local government. It is working all over the state. I've been all over the state, and this is the best prepared I've seen. Now, FEMA is stretched because they're in Texas. They held back people from going to Texas so they could bring them into Florida. But FEMA is really going to have to do extra work after the storm.
Well, given the size of the storm, that's been one of the problems for FEMA about wanting, they like to obviously pre-position supplies and resources. But where do you pre-position when the storm is affecting the entire state and you don't exactly know where it's going?
And it has. It's covered up the entire state.
Yeah. The other thing I heard Administrator Brock Long of FEMA say to Renee Marsh yesterday out of Washington is that there could be millions of people without power, possibly for weeks. There's a big elderly population, obviously, in the state of Florida. How concerned are you?
Well, I'm very concerned. Already in South Florida, we have about 750,000 people without power.
750,000.
That's just in South Florida because of all those rain bands and the wind bands that have come in from the Atlantic. As you move that state through the entire peninsula, you're going to have a lot of down trees onto power lines. There are going to be a lot of people, and that's when neighbors helping neighbors is really going to count. Go check on your neighbor. Make sure that they're doing okay.
When the electricity goes out, things can change very quickly for a lot of people. I mean, there are people who need access to medication. There are people who need access to dialysis. We saw that in Harvey. Even just kind of the mundane day-to-day things that people need for their health. When there's no electricity, those are things that have to be taken care of.
I've never seen people as prepared in Florida as I have here. They've got, most people are packing up ice, putting it in coolers to try to get as far as they can without power. But as you say, Anderson, if it's weeks without power, it'll be a real strain.
What are you hearing from the Keys?
Well, I talked to the mayor of Key West. The hurricane was going to the right of him, somewhere between there and Marathon. Marathon is probably getting the worst of the wind. But they are, they're conks. They're accustomed to hurricanes. By the way, a tremendous evacuation. They only had about 10,000 people left in the whole county. They moved most of their emergency operations up to the northernmost key, Key Largo. So they're as prepared as they can be.
Yeah. Senator Nelson, I really appreciate your time. Thank you. Good luck to you.
Thanks.
Senator Nelson, who's been traveling around. He was in Orlando earlier, went to the EOC, trying to check on as many locations as he can. Again, we have reporters who've been looking at John Berman in Miami, just getting really hammered there in Miami. Also, Chris Cuomo starting to expect a turn and some really bad weather, according to Chad Myers, in the next hour or so. Our coverage is going to continue, obviously, from here and all points across southern Florida and beyond. We'll be right back.
This is a quest explore the wonders of our world before the sun sets and the moment passes.
Are you worried about the future? And these are all toxic pools now. Never seen anything like this before.
Go there before it's gone. The Wonderlist with Bill Weir returns Saturday, October 7th at 9 on CNN.
10 seasons on CNN. How the did that happen?
Anthony Bourdain, Parts Unknown,